Hi everyone, welcome back. If you're seeking calm, deep rest, and peaceful sleep, you're in the right place. Let's begin.
For thousands of years, Zen masters have whispered gentle truths about the art of letting go. They spoke not of escape or indifference, but of freedom, a quiet kind of peace that comes when we stop holding on so tightly. These are not complicated ideas or distant dreams. They are simple teachings, meant for hearts that have grown tired of carrying too much. Before we begin, take a moment to notice where you are. Feel the ground beneath you, the air around you, the rhythm of your own breath. There is no need to rush or to try to understand everything at once. Just allow the words to settle softly within you, like falling leaves finding their place on still water. As we move together through these Zen stories, you may find that peace doesn't need to be chased or earned. It has always been here, waiting quietly beneath your worries, beneath your thoughts, beneath the noise of everyday life. Each story you'll hear tonight is a doorway, opening towards stillness. Some may touch you like a warm breeze, others may linger like the echo of a temple bell. All of them carry the same message. When you release your grip on what was or what should be, peace finds its way to you. So, breathe in deeply, let your shoulders soften. There is nothing you must fix, nothing you must figure out. With every breath, the weight of yesterday begins to fade. You have already arrived. Now, let us begin the journey. If you let go, peace will find you. A young monk once came to his master with a troubled heart. Though he had spent years in the temple chanting, meditating, sweeping the courtyards, and studying the sacred texts, something within him remained unsettled. He followed every rule with discipline, yet peace felt distant, like a bell ringing faintly from across a valley. One evening, after meditation, the monk found his master sitting quietly in the garden. The night air was cool, and the sound of water trickled softly from a nearby fountain. The master sat beneath a lantern, pouring himself a cup of tea, the steam rising gently in the dim light. The monk bowed deeply and said, "Master, I do not understand. I do everything that is asked of me. I rise early, I meditate, I serve, I pray, and yet my mind feels restless. My thoughts chase one another even in silence. Why can I not find peace?" The master lifted his eyes, calm and patient. "Sit," he said softly. "Would you like some tea?" "Yes, master," the monk replied. The old man poured tea into a small clay cup. He filled it to the brim, but he did not stop. The tea spilled over the rim, flowing onto the table and down onto the ground. "Master," the young monk cried, "the cup is full, it cannot hold any more." The master set the teapot down, his eyes kind and knowing. "Like this cup," he said, "you are full of yourself, full of your learning, your efforts, your ideas of what peace should be. How can I pour peace into you when there is no room left for it to enter?" The monk stared at the spilled tea, feeling a heat rise in his chest, not anger, but realization. He bowed his head in silence. They sat together for a long while, saying nothing. The sound of crickets filled the garden. Finally, the master spoke again. "You meditate," he said, "but your meditation is crowded. Your thoughts sit with you, shoulder to shoulder, whispering their opinions. You are busy even in stillness. You have made peace into another goal to be reached, another thing to grasp." The monk looked down. "I only wanted to be a good student," he said quietly. "I thought if I practiced harder, I would earn peace." The master smiled gently. "Peace is not earned. It is revealed when you stop filling yourself with what you think it should be. A cup that is full cannot receive, but when it is empty, it can hold the universe." That night, the monk returned to his room and sat in the dark. He listened to his own breath. He noticed how thoughts came and went some about the past, some about the future, but he did not try to stop them. He simply watched. For the first time, he did not chase after peace. He allowed it to come and go as it pleased. Days passed, and something in him began to shift. When he swept the courtyard, he noticed the sound of the broom, the rhythm of each motion. When he washed his bowl after meals, he felt the water against his skin, cool and clean. When the temple bell rang, he listened not for meaning, but for sound. One morning, the master found him sitting beneath a tree by the pond. His posture was relaxed, his face soft. "You seem different," the master said. The monk smiled faintly. "I no longer fight my thoughts, master. I let them pass, like clouds moving across the sky. I have stopped trying to make peace happen." The master nodded. "Then you have begun to understand. When you stop grasping, life flows naturally. When you stop forcing stillness, the heart becomes still by itself. The mind is like water. When you stop stirring it, it clears." He reached for a cup nearby and poured water from a jug. "Do you see?" he said. "The cup does not beg to be filled. It simply waits, open and ready. It never complains when it is empty, never clings when it is full. You must learn to be like the cup." The monk bowed, understanding a little more. From that day forward, his practice changed. He no longer rushed through rituals or measured his progress. He no longer compared himself to others. He allowed each moment to be enough. When he made mistakes, he bowed to them as teachers. When he succeeded, he let the joy pass through him like wind through bamboo. Weeks later, as the two of them walked through the temple garden, the master stopped near a tea plant heavy with leaves. He touched one gently and said, "Each leaf grows because it lets the sunlight in. If it tried to hold the light, it would wither. Letting go is the same. To receive life, you must stop holding it so tightly." That evening, the young monk joined the others in the tea house. The air smelled faintly of roasted leaves and wood smoke. He poured tea for the master and for himself. He stopped before the cup was full. The master smiled. "Ah," he said, "you've learned not to overflow." The monk bowed. "I learned that emptiness is not nothing, master. It is space for everything." The master laughed softly. "Yes, when the cup is empty, it waits without worry. When it is filled, it gives without effort. When it is spilled, it accepts without complaint. That is the way of peace." Years passed, and the monk grew older. He too became a teacher. One day, a traveler came to his temple seeking guidance. "Master," the traveler said, "I have studied many books, prayed to many gods, and worked hard to find peace, but I cannot grasp it. My mind is always racing." The monk poured him tea. The traveler watched as the cup filled, then overflowed. "Stop!" the traveler shouted. "You're wasting the tea." The old monk smiled kindly. "And you," he said, "are wasting your heart. You try to hold too much. You have filled yourself with knowledge, worry, and desire. You must first empty your cup." The traveler frowned. "But how does one empty the heart?" the monk replied. "By noticing what fills it, by seeing each thought for what it is and letting it pass, by allowing life to flow through you without trying to control it. The heart empties when it stops clinging." That night, the traveler stayed at the temple. For the first time in years, he slept soundly. When he awoke before dawn, he heard the temple bell echo through the hills. It was the same sound it had always been, yet he felt it differently, as if it was ringing inside him, not around him. He thanked the monk before leaving. "Master," he said, "I think I understand. Peace was never gone. It was only hidden beneath all that I refused to let go." The monk smiled. "Yes, peace is what remains when the noise leaves." Long after the traveler was gone, the monk continued to pour tea each morning. Sometimes he drank it alone, sometimes with students. The ritual was always the same, simple, quiet, complete. Every drop a reminder. Nothing needs to be added, nothing needs to be taken away. The story of the overflowing cup became one of his favorite lessons. He would tell it to anyone who came burdened by worry or pride. Some laughed, some cried, but all understood. He would say, "We spend our lives filling ourselves, our minds with thoughts, our hearts with longing, our days with endless doing. But fullness is not peace. A crowded heart cannot breathe. When you empty yourself, even for a moment, you return to what you truly are, open, spacious, alive." And when someone asked, "But what if emptiness feels lonely?" he would smile and answer, "That is because you have not yet looked deeply. True emptiness is not absence, it is presence. It is the sky that holds every cloud, the silence that holds every sound." As the years went on, he found that the lesson never grew old. Each day brought something new to release an expectation, a fear, a memory. Each time he let one go, he felt lighter. He understood now that peace was not an achievement, but a return to simplicity, to clarity, to openness. When the evening bells rang, he often walked alone to the garden where he had once sat with his master. The same stone table still stood there, weathered and moss-covered. He would pour himself a cup of tea, watch the steam rise, and smile. In that quiet moment, he knew that his master's teaching lived not in words, but in the space between them. Peace, he thought, is like the tea, it can only fill an empty cup. He lifted the cup to his lips, tasted the warmth, and whispered to the wind, "Thank you." The wind carried his words away, light as breath, and in that empty space, peace remained. A fisherman lived in a small village by a quiet river. Every morning, before the first light touched the horizon, he pushed his small wooden boat into the water. His life was simple, steady, and full of rhythm. The sound of water against the hull, the pull of the net, the weight of the catch, and the soft silence that came after. He had fished this river for many years, and it had become part of him. But there was one thing he treasured most, a net he had woven with his own hands long ago. He had made it from fine hemp, its knots tied carefully, each one representing patience and precision. It had served him faithfully through calm days and storms alike. To him, it was more than a tool. It was a companion. One morning, as the sun began to rise, the fisherman cast his beloved net into the river as he always did. But when he pulled it back, the current was stronger than usual. The river had swelled from heavy rains the night before, and as he struggled to lift it, the rope slipped through his wet fingers. He reached to catch it again, but the current tugged it away faster than he could react. Within moments, the net disappeared beneath the surface, swallowed by the restless water. He stood there, frozen, his breath caught in his chest. For a few seconds, he hoped it might reappear, perhaps snagged on a rock or floating nearby, but the river carried on as if nothing had happened. His heart sank. That net had been his security, his way of life, his pride. Without it, he felt lost, as though part of himself had been taken by the water. He searched the banks up and down, wading through reeds and slippery stones, calling out to the river as if it could return what it had taken. He plunged his hands into the cold water, diving again and again, each time coming up empty. Hours passed. The sun climbed high and the heat pressed down on his back. His arms ached, his breath grew short, and his mind was a storm of frustration. "Why did this happen?" he shouted at the river. "I've given you my whole life. Why would you take from me what I love most?" The river gave no answer. It simply flowed, as rivers do. By late afternoon, exhaustion replaced anger. He sat on the bank, staring at the rippling water. The river glistened under the fading sun, indifferent to his sorrow. He had searched for so long, but the harder he tried, the further peace seemed to drift away. As darkness fell, the fisherman built a small fire beside the water. He roasted a few fish caught with a spare hook and line, though he could hardly eat. His thoughts swirled like the current itself, memories of when he first made the net, the satisfaction of each good catch, the simple joy of casting it into the morning mist. All gone now, he thought bitterly. When the fire burned low, he felt the weariness of the day settle into his bones. The river, once roaring, was calm again under the night sky. The moon rose, silver and full, laying a long ribbon of light across the water. The fisherman, too tired to move, simply sat and watched. Something inside him began to soften. For the first time that day, he stopped thinking about what he had lost. He stopped struggling against what had already happened. The river whispered softly in the night, and he listened. The wind brushed his skin, cool and gentle. He watched how the moonlight trembled on the moving water, never still, yet always whole. In that quiet, his breath slowed. His anger melted away, replaced by something lighter, quieter. He realized that the river had always taken and returned things in its own time. Branches, leaves, reflections, even fish. Perhaps it was not his to command. Perhaps his net was never truly lost, only moving where it needed to go. Time slipped by unnoticed. He sat like a stone at the edge of the current, awake but peaceful. The night deepened, and still he watched. Then, just before dawn, something caught his eye. Floating gently near the edge of the light was a familiar shape. He leaned closer, not daring to blink. There, tangled among the reeds, was his net. He blinked again to be sure. It was torn in places, its edges frayed, but it was unmistakably his. Slowly, he waded into the water and pulled it close. The net was heavier now, soaked and worn, yet he felt no disappointment, only gratitude. He washed it carefully, spreading it on the rocks to dry in the soft light of morning. The fisherman sat beside it for a long time, staring at the net, then at the river. He realized that the river had not taken his net away as punishment, nor returned it as a reward. It had simply moved in its natural way. The loss and the return were part of the same rhythm. He smiled quietly, understanding something he had never seen before. Peace, he thought, comes like this only when we stop chasing it. In the days that followed, the fisherman's life returned to its rhythm, but something in him had changed. He no longer rose each morning with anxious energy or fear of losing what he loved. When he cast his net, he did it with ease, without attachment to what might come. Some days the catch was generous, other days meager, but he accepted both as part of the flow. He began to see the river differently. Before, it had been something to work against, a force to control, to conquer, to extract from. Now, he saw it as a companion, always changing, always alive. When storms came and the water rose, he no longer cursed it, he waited. When the current grew calm, he moved with it. One evening, a young man from the village came to him, carrying a newly made net. "Teach me to fish," the boy said eagerly. The fisherman smiled and agreed. Together they rowed out to the middle of the river. The boy was impatient, casting and pulling the net too quickly, frowning each time he caught nothing. The fisherman watched quietly for a while before saying, "You are like I once was, always searching, never seeing." The boy looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "You cast the net again, and again," the fisherman said. "But your mind is not in the river. It is already thinking of what you might catch, or whether you will fail. When you chase the fish, they scatter. But when you become still, they come to you." The boy frowned. "But how can I be still and still catch fish?" The fisherman laughed softly. "Stillness is not about doing nothing. It is about not fighting what is. When you drop your net with a calm heart, the river helps you. When you throw it in anger, the river resists you." The boy listened, though he did not yet understand. As the sun set, they sat in silence, watching the light fade from gold to grey. The river shimmered under the first stars, and the fisherman thought of that night when he had lost his net. He felt a deep peace, knowing that even loss had its purpose. When they returned to the shore, the boy asked, "Do you ever worry that you'll lose your net again?" The fisherman shook his head. "If it goes, it goes. The river gives, and the river takes. I no longer hold it too tightly. It is enough to cast it with gratitude and to trust what comes back." That night, the fisherman slept deeply. His dreams were filled with flowing water, endless and calm. Years passed, and the fisherman grew old. His hair turned white, and his hands became lined from years of labor. Yet his eyes remained bright and clear, like the surface of the river on a still morning. One autumn evening, when the air was cool and the leaves began to fall, a traveler stopped by his small hut. The traveler was weary and troubled. "Old man," he said, "I have been searching all my life for peace, for success, for happiness. I chase one thing after another, but I never find what I'm looking for. My heart is as restless as the wind. Can you tell me how to find peace?" The fisherman poured him a cup of tea and smiled. "You remind me of myself long ago. Sit with me, and I'll tell you a story." He told the traveler about the day he lost his net, the searching, the exhaustion, the anger, the moment he finally sat down and stopped fighting. He spoke of the moonlight on the river and how peace came not when he found the net, but when he stopped needing to. The traveler listened silently, his eyes fixed on the flames of the small fire. When the story ended, he said softly, "So the river gave it back to you when you stopped searching?" The fisherman shook his head. "No, the river did nothing different. I changed. When I stopped chasing, I could finally see what was already returning to me. Sometimes peace is there all along, but our chasing stirs the water so much that we cannot see it." The traveler frowned. "But how do I stop chasing?" The fisherman looked at him kindly. "You stop when you realize there is nowhere to go. When you see that what you seek is already within you, you rest. The river never hurries, yet it reaches the sea." The traveler was quiet for a long time. Then he smiled faintly. "I think I understand," he said. The old fisherman nodded. "Understanding is not the goal. Living is. Sit by the river, watch, listen. When you stop forcing life to give you answers, the answers arrive on their own." That night, the traveler stayed by the riverbank. The moon rose, silver and full, just as it had on that long-ago night. He sat watching the water until his mind grew still. In the silence, he felt something loosen in his chest, a weight he hadn't realized he was carrying. He smiled, not because he had found what he was looking for, but because he no longer needed to look. The next morning, when he went to thank the fisherman, the old man was gone. The hut stood empty, the door open, the fishing net neatly folded by the riverbank. The traveler picked it up and felt the coarse threads between his fingers. It smelled faintly of water and wind. He set it down again and whispered, "Thank you." The river flowed on, endless and serene. Peace, like the fisherman's net, does not come through striving. It appears when striving ends. The more we chase it, the more it slips away. But when we sit still, when we allow the river of life to flow as it will, peace drifts quietly back to us, gentle as moonlight on moving water. And in that moment, we see the truth that Zen masters have known for centuries. What we lose is never truly gone. When we stop chasing, it returns in its own time, carrying the calm of the river itself. Peace was never hiding from us. We were only stirring the water. In a quiet monastery surrounded by mountains, there lived a monk known for his extraordinary talent with a brush. He was called Shinyo, which meant heart of truth. Before he had taken his vows, he had been a painter in the city, famous for the grace of his lines and the harmony of his colors. When he joined the monastery, he brought only one thing with him: his finest brush, made of soft horsehair and carved from sandalwood. To him, This brush was more than a tool. It was the bridge between the inner world of spirit and the outer world of form. With it, he painted scrolls for meditation halls, scenes of nature, and portraits of the Buddha that seemed to breathe with life. Every monk admired his art, and even travelers from distant villages would come to see his paintings. One day, the abbot asked Shinyo to paint a great mural on the wall of the temple's meditation hall, a painting that would capture the spirit of enlightenment itself. It would be the largest work of his life. For weeks, he meditated before even touching the wall. He studied the movement of clouds, the stillness of stones, the way bamboo bowed and rose again. He wanted the mural to express something beyond beauty, the quiet truth that lives inside all things. Finally, when he was ready, he prepared his paints with care. He cleaned his brush and bowed before the blank wall. Then, with slow, graceful strokes, he began to paint. The first lines flowed easily, mountains rising into the mist, a river winding through them, trees leaning softly with the wind. The other monks would often pause by the doorway to watch him. It seemed as if his brush moved by itself, guided by something unseen. Days passed, then weeks. The mural grew, each section alive with energy. Yet as the work neared completion, Shinyo began to feel a quiet pressure in his heart. He wanted this painting to be perfect, more perfect than anything he had ever done before. This, he thought, must be his greatest offering to the Buddha, to the temple, to the world. But with every stroke, the desire for perfection grew stronger. His movements became slower, more cautious. He began to hesitate before touching the wall. When the line wasn't exactly how he wanted it, he would scrape it away and start again. Soon his joy was replaced by tension. One evening, after a long day of work, he noticed a single detail that didn't seem right, the curve of a wave, slightly off. He leaned closer, adjusted his brush, and pressed harder to correct it. Suddenly, with a sharp sound, the handle of the brush snapped in two. He froze. The bristles hung limp, half of the handle still in his hand. The brush that had painted his life's work lay broken in silence. For a long time, Shinyo didn't move. His heart sank like a stone. He had cared for this brush for years, never letting another hand touch it. And now, when he needed it most, it was gone. He tried to fix it, to tie the pieces together, but the break was clean and final. He sat down on the floor, his hands trembling. The mural stood unfinished before him, half a mountain still blank, the final lines incomplete. As the evening bell rang, he felt tears rising in his eyes. All his years of skill, all his devotion, all his planning wasted. That night, Shinyo sat in his room, staring at the broken brush. The moonlight filtered through the paper screens, soft and pale. He thought of starting over, of finding another brush, but none could replace this one. None could feel the same. He whispered to the empty room, "I have failed." But in the silence that followed, a small voice inside him asked, "Failed who?" The question startled him. He realized that no one had demanded perfection from him but himself. The abbot had never asked for flawless art. The Buddha he painted had never spoken of perfection. Only his own mind, filled with pride and fear, had turned his work into a battle. He thought of the countless hours he had spent trying to control each line, each color, and how, in that control, he had lost the freedom he once felt when painting. The joy had gone, replaced by striving. He looked again at the broken brush. It lay there quietly, as if waiting for him to understand something deeper. In the morning, he went to the river behind the temple. The dawn air was cold and fresh. He sat by the bank, watching the current carry leaves downstream. The river moved effortlessly, never perfect, never wrong. A leaf floated past, then a twig, then a petal. Nothing clung, nothing resisted. He picked up a small twig from the ground, thin and rough. Turning it in his hand, he noticed how uneven it was, how far it was from the smooth balance of his old brush. Yet it felt alive. He returned to the meditation hall. The half-finished mural waited, silent. He dipped the twig into the ink and touched it to the wall. The line it made was jagged, unpredictable. It bled unevenly into the plaster. At first, he frowned. Then he breathed and continued. The twig moved freely, not as precise as his brush, but natural, wild, imperfect, human. The river became more alive, the mountains more real. The forms no longer looked controlled. They breathed, they moved, they spoke. Hours passed. When he finally stepped back, the mural was complete. It wasn't what he had imagined, it was something else entirely. The lines were rough in places, the shading uneven. But it felt alive, as if the wall itself were breathing. When the abbot came to see it, he stood quietly for a long time. Then he said, "It feels as if the wind itself painted this." Shinyo bowed low. "I broke my brush," he said. "I had to finish it with a twig." The abbot smiled. Then the twig knew what the brush did not. That night, the painter sat again by the river, feeling lighter than he had in years. He realized that the mural's beauty came not from perfection but from surrender. The broken brush had freed him from himself. For many days afterward, monks from nearby temples came to see the painting. Some praised its simplicity, others its power. But Shinyo only smiled. He knew the true masterpiece wasn't on the wall, it was the stillness that had returned to his heart. Years later, when students asked him about the mural, he would tell them, "The day I broke my brush was the day my art began to breathe." He explained that perfection, like a chain, binds the spirit. When we strive too hard to make things flawless, we close the door to life's natural rhythm. Perfection, he would say, is a prison built from the fear of being wrong. But life itself is not afraid of imperfection. It moves, it changes, it cracks, it grows. He often told a story to his younger students. Once, he said, a flower tried to bloom perfectly. It waited for the right sunlight, the right wind, the right rain. It waited so long that the season passed, and it never bloomed at all. Meanwhile, the other flowers opened imperfectly, petals bent, colors uneven, yet they filled the garden with beauty. The flower that waited remained pure, but it was never alive. As the years went by, Shinyo painted less. He spent more time teaching and tending the gardens. But every now and then, he would pick up a stick, dip it into ink, and paint on scraps of paper or stones. The lines were always uneven, but each one was alive. One day, a traveler visited the temple. He had heard of Shinyo's mural and wanted to see it. When he entered the meditation hall, he stood in awe before the vast painting. "Master," he said, "I have studied art all my life, yet I have never seen such freedom in a painting. Tell me, how did you learn to paint like this?" Shinyo smiled gently. "I stopped trying to paint perfectly," he said. "When I broke my brush, I also broke my idea of what beauty should be. The wall finished itself once I stepped out of the way." The traveler looked puzzled. "But surely discipline is important." "Yes," Shinyo said. "Discipline prepares the hand, but freedom opens the heart. Without both, art is either chaos or control. Real beauty lives in between." That night, after the traveler left, Shinyo sat beneath a lantern and thought of his old brush. He had kept its broken pieces all these years, wrapped in a small cloth. He unwrapped them now and looked at them for a long time. Then he smiled and placed them in the fire. The flames rose, soft and golden, curling around the sandalwood. A faint scent filled the room, sweet, familiar. He watched until the last ember faded into ash. There was no sadness in him, only peace. He knew that the brush had served its purpose. It had led him to the edge of his own need for control and then let him fall into freedom. In the following spring, moss began to grow at the base of the mural. The colors softened with time, and cracks appeared on the wall, yet even as it aged, it became more beautiful. Visitors said the cracks looked like veins in a living thing, as though the mural was breathing with the temple itself. When a young monk worried aloud about the fading paint, Shinyo said, "Let it fade. Beauty is not meant to last forever. The moment it fades, it teaches us what never fades." He lived many more years, quietly and content. When he grew too old to paint, he would still sit by the river, watching how water shaped the stones over time. He saw how the edges that once seemed broken became smooth and shining. In his final days, as he lay resting, one of his students asked, "Master, what is the most important lesson you have learned?" He smiled weakly and said, "When the brush broke, I wept. I thought beauty had left me, but beauty does not belong to the brush or to the hand. It lives in the act of letting go. The more we let go, the more life paints through us." He closed his eyes and whispered, "Perfection is stillness without life. Imperfection is life still moving." The next morning, the monks found him sitting upright, as if in meditation. A faint smile lingered on his face. The mural glowed softly in the morning light, its colors faded but alive. They kept it just as it was, never restored, never repainted. Travelers still came to see it for generations after, and each one said the same thing. It felt alive, as if it were still being painted. And so the broken brush continued its work long after Shinyo was gone, teaching all who stood before that wall that beauty is not born from perfection, but from surrender. When we stop forcing the world to meet our image of it, when we stop demanding that life unfold flawlessly, we discover a deeper kind of harmony, one that breathes, one that forgives, one that lives. The mural remains there still, whispering the lesson the old monk learned that day. The moment we let go of perfection, beauty begins to breathe. A young disciple once lived in a small Zen temple at the edge of a forest. His name was Riku. He had come to the temple when he was only 16, leaving behind a noisy world that had disappointed him. He wanted peace, wisdom, and the kind of happiness that did not vanish with time. Every morning, before the bell called the monks to meditation, Riku would walk along the forest path. He loved the quiet of dawn, the mist rising from the trees, the dew on the grass, and most of all, the birds. Their songs echoed through the valley, soft at first, and then rising into a bright chorus that seemed to awaken the world itself. To Riku, their voices were pure joy. One morning, as he listened to a small yellow bird perched on a branch, an idea took hold in his mind. If I could keep one of these birds near me, he thought, I could hear this song every day. It would remind me of beauty even on difficult days. The thought seemed harmless, even kind. So he decided to catch one. He spent the next few days making a small bamboo cage. He worked carefully, shaping each piece so it would not hurt the bird. When he was finished, he admired it proudly. "It is not to imprison," he said to himself, "it is to protect." The next morning, he set a few grains of rice beneath a tree and waited. The yellow bird returned, as it often did, hopping close to the food. Riku held his breath, moved gently, and with a quick motion of his hands, caught the bird inside the small cage. At first, he was overjoyed. He spoke softly to the little creature, offering water and more rice. "Now you can rest," he said. "You will never be cold or hungry again." The bird fluttered its wings, uncertain, then grew still. That night, Riku placed the cage beside his sleeping mat. He listened for the bird's song, but it made no sound. "It must be tired," he thought. "Tomorrow it will sing." But morning came, and still the bird was silent. The forest outside was filled with music, but inside the small cage there was only stillness. Riku frowned and said, "Perhaps it needs time to get used to me." He tried to speak gently to it, to comfort it, but the bird only looked back at him with dark, unblinking eyes. Days passed, and the bird remained quiet. Riku began to worry. He gave it fresh water and food, moved its cage into sunlight, then into shade, hoping something would help. But nothing changed. The bird's wings drooped, and it began to move less and less. Riku's joy turned into confusion, then into sadness. Why won't it sing? He asked himself. I care for it. I keep it safe. I give it everything it needs. One evening, the master of the temple noticed the young disciple sitting outside, staring at the cage beside him. The master was old, his face lined like the bark of an ancient tree, but his eyes were warm and sharp. "What troubles you, Riku?" he asked. Riku bowed. "Master, I caught this bird because I loved its song. I built it a home, fed it, kept it warm, but since I caught it, it has not sung a single note. I do not understand. Shouldn't kindness make it happy?" The master looked at the small bird in the cage. It sat motionless, silent. Then he said, "When you hear the bird sing, what do you think it is singing for?" Riku thought for a moment. "Perhaps for joy, or for the morning light." The master nodded. "Yes, but mostly it sings because it is free. It sings because it is alive, not because someone listens. You did not want to hear the bird, you wanted to own its song. But no one can own a song, Riku. The moment you tried to keep it, the song died." Riku lowered his head. "I only wanted to keep the beauty close." The master smiled gently. "The mistake of youth," he said, "is believing that beauty must belong to us to be real. But beauty lives only in its freedom. The flower blooms, the wind moves, the bird sings not to please us, but because that is their nature. To hold them too tightly is to silence them." That night, Riku could not sleep. He sat watching the cage by candlelight. The bird looked smaller now, as if the walls around it had stolen its strength. He felt a weight in his chest, the weight of regret. Before dawn, he opened the cage. The bird hesitated at first, unsure. Then, with a small flutter, it stepped to the edge, spread its wings, and flew into the dim morning sky. For a moment, it was only a shadow against the grey light then. Faintly, he heard it sing. It was a short song, but it was clear, wild, and alive. Riku closed his eyes. The sound filled him in a way silence never could. When the master found him later that morning, Riku was still sitting by the open cage. "You look lighter today," the master said. Riku nodded. The bird sang again. "Of course," said the master. "True joy sings only in freedom." He gestured toward the trees. "Do you hear? The forest sings without walls. It needs no cage. Peace is like that too. It comes only when the mind is open." Riku bowed deeply. He understood that moment more clearly than any lesson he had studied. The cage had not only trapped the bird, it had trapped his heart as well. In the days that followed, Riku continued his walks through the forest. The birds still sang, and though none of them were his, their songs filled him with the same joy. But now, instead of longing to possess them, he simply listened. Each note reminded him of something the master once said: "What you hold too tightly will slip away. What you honor in freedom will stay with you forever." Years passed, and Riku grew into a wise teacher himself. Many students came to him with questions about love, attachment, and loss. He would tell them the story of the bird and the cage. One day, a student asked, "Master Riku, how do we love without trying to keep what we love close?" He smiled. "Love that clings is born from fear," he said. "Fear that we might lose what we think we need. But when love is free, it has no fear. It does not grasp, it does not demand. It simply allows the other to be what they are." The student frowned. "But isn't it natural to want those we love to stay with us?" "Yes," Riku replied. "But it is also natural for rivers to flow, for clouds to drift, for birds to fly. The world moves, and so must love. When we try to stop it from moving, we suffer. Letting go does not mean not caring. It means caring so deeply that we allow life to move in its own way. The student was quiet for a moment. And if they never come back? Riku smiled. Then their song becomes part of the wind. You may not see them again, but their spirit remains with you, everywhere you go. That evening, as the sun set, Riku walked once more along the forest path. The air was filled with the sound of birds. He felt the same joy he had felt long ago, but now it was mixed with understanding. He no longer saw beauty as something fragile to be held, but as something eternal, present in every moment we release control. He thought of the bird that had once sat silent in the cage, and how it had sung again only when freed. He realized that people, too, are often like that bird. When confined by their fears, expectations, or the judgments of others, their true voice grows quiet. Only when they are accepted as they are, when they are trusted to be free, does their song return. Later that night, as the monks gathered for meditation, Riku told them, "Many people build cages they cannot see. Some cage others with their love, some cage themselves with their fears. But freedom is not found in control. It is found in trust. When you trust life, you no longer need to catch its beauty, it flows to you naturally." He paused and looked around at the young monks sitting before him. "Remember," he said softly, "peace does not live in holding tight. It lives in the open palm." As he spoke, a small bird flew through the open window of the hall. It circled once, then landed briefly on the edge of a candle stand. For a heartbeat, the monks sat still, afraid to move. Then the bird lifted its wings and flew back into the night. Riku smiled. "See," he said quietly, "even the bird knows when to come and when to go. It is not ours to keep, but its visit leaves the room brighter." The monks watched the moonlight streaming through the window. None spoke. The silence was full, peaceful, alive. Years later, after Riku had grown old, travelers who visited his temple would often notice a small, empty cage hanging by the window. It was polished and well kept, but there was no bird inside. When asked about it, Riku would simply smile and say, "It reminds me that love is not about possession. The cage stays empty so the sky can stay full." When he passed away, the monks decided to leave the cage where it was. Over time, ivy began to grow around it, and wild birds often perched upon it, singing freely before flying off again. Visitors would sometimes pause before the window and listen. If the wind was right, they could hear the faint rustle of wings and the echo of a distant song. And those who listened carefully understood what Riku had learned long ago, that joy cannot live behind bars and beauty cannot belong to us. The song we try to hold will fade, but the song we let fly will fill the world forever. True joy, as the master once said, sings only in freedom. And when we free what we love, people, moments, memories, even our own hearts, we hear that song again. Not from the cage, but from the open sky. High above the earth, in a sky soft and endless, a single raindrop clung to the edge of a cloud. Around it, thousands of other drops shimmered in the pale light, gliding freely within the mist. But this one was afraid. It looked down at the world far below the mountains, rivers and valleys, and trembled. "What lies beneath?" it whispered. "The earth," said an older drop nearby, smiling gently. "The great ocean waits for us." The little raindrop shivered. "It looks so far. What if I fall and disappear?" The older drop laughed softly. "You will not disappear, you will return." But the little one did not understand. For many days the cloud drifted gently over the world. The wind carried it through sun and shadow, over forests and seas. Each time, thunder rumbled, and the other drops leapt joyfully into the open air. The little raindrop stayed behind, clinging tightly to the soft edge of vapor. "I will stay here where it is safe," it said to itself. "If I fall, I will lose everything I am." Yet, as time passed, the cloud grew heavy. The weight of countless drops waiting to be born pressed down. Lightning flashed, thunder rolled. The little drop felt the pull stronger than ever before. The sky began to open. "I can't," it cried. "I'm not ready." But the cloud only smiled in silence, as if it knew something the little raindrop did not. The wind grew wild. The raindrop trembled, holding on with all its might. It thought of the long journey it had taken to form, from vapor rising in the warmth of the sun, gathering with others to make this cloud. It thought of how comfortable it felt here, surrounded by soft mist, untouched by the ground below. Yet deep inside, it also felt something else, a quiet ache, a longing for something it couldn't name. Then, with a sudden gust, its grip loosened. The little raindrop fell. For a heartbeat, fear filled it completely. The world rushed upward. The air howled around it, and everything it had known, the comfort of the cloud, the nearness of its companions, vanished. "This is the end," it thought. But as it fell, something changed. The drop began to feel the wind, not as an enemy, but as a friend. It lifted and cradled the drop, carrying it with grace. The fear that had filled it slowly gave way to wonder. The sky was no longer something to be clung to, but something to move through. And then, in one quiet moment, the raindrop touched the surface of the ocean. There was no crash, no sound of breaking, only joining. The raindrop disappeared, and yet it did not. It became part of something vast, beyond imagination. It moved with waves that stretched farther than sight. It danced with the currents and reflected the light of the Sunday. For the first time, it felt no boundaries. It was still the drop, and yet it was everything. Time passed in stillness. The ocean breathed in tides, rising and falling with the moon. The drop floated freely, at peace. Then one day, warmth began to lift it once more. The sun drew it upward, turning it into mist, light as air. It rose again toward the sky, joining other drops to form another cloud. And when it reached the heights once more, it remembered the fear it had once felt. It smiled softly. It had never fallen, it had only changed form. One afternoon, as the new cloud drifted above the mountains, the same raindrop, now part of mist, watched another drop forming nearby. The new drop was young and trembling. "I don't want to fall," it whispered. "What if I'm lost forever?" The old drop, remembering, replied, "You won't be lost. You will return home." But still, the little one clung to the edge. So the old drop said, "When you fall, don't think of it as losing your place. Think of it as finding your path. You are not meant to stay here. You are meant to flow." The young drop looked uncertain. "But what if I stop being me?" The old drop answered. "You are not what you think you are. You are not the shape you take. You are the water itself, and water never truly ends." Down below, a monk was sitting by the sea, watching the waves roll in and out. He had been meditating there since morning, observing the rhythm of the tide. Each wave rose, shone for a moment, and fell again into the vastness. He thought of his own life, the years that had risen and fallen, the people he had met, the things he had lost. He smiled softly, for he saw in the sea a mirror of himself. When his young student approached him, the monk said, "Sit and look at the waves." The student obeyed. "Master," he said, "why do we meditate by the sea?" The monk gestured toward the horizon. "Because the sea never resists the waves. It allows them to come and go, and yet it remains. When you understand that you are the sea, not the wave, fear ends." The student frowned. "But I feel small." "I am not the sea," the monk smiled. That is what the raindrop once thought. He told the student the story of the drop who feared falling from the cloud, how it clung and trembled, how it finally fell, and how it discovered that what it had feared most was the very thing that returned it to its true home. The student listened quietly, then asked, "So the fall was not the end?" "No," said the monk. "It was the beginning of understanding." The student gazed out at the waves. "Master, are we also raindrops?" The monk nodded. "Each of us begins high in the sky of our own ideas. We cling to our clouds, to our names, our bodies, our possessions, our stories. We fear losing them. But when life pulls us down, when we can no longer hold on, we discover something greater waiting to receive us." The boy thought for a long moment. "And when we let go, then we do not fall," said the master. "We merge with something vast." That evening the sun melted into the sea, and the sky turned the color of gold and wine. The monk and his student watched quietly, the sound of waves filling the silence between them. The student finally said, "I think I understand, Master. To cling is to be small. To let go is to become whole." The monk smiled. "Yes, when you let go, you join the rhythm of life itself. You become part of everything." Many years passed. The student grew into a wise teacher, known for his calm presence and gentle smile. People often came to him in times of fear of change, of loss, of death. One day, an old woman came to him, her face weary from years of sorrow. "Master," she said, "I am afraid. My husband is gone, my children have moved away, and I feel like a leaf torn from its tree. I have nothing left to hold on to." The master listened carefully. Then he said, "Do you remember the story of the raindrop?" The woman nodded faintly. "Yes. It fell and became part of the ocean." He smiled. "You are like that raindrop now. You think you have fallen, but you are returning. Everything you have loved still lives within you, just as the river lives in the sea. Nothing truly ends, it only changes form." Tears filled her eyes. "But it hurts to let go." "Yes," the master said softly, "because you still believe you are the drop. Once you know you are the ocean, there is no more fear." She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. For a long time they sat together in silence, listening to the distant waves. When she finally opened her eyes, her face had softened. "Thank you," she whispered. "I think I can let go now." The master nodded. "When you let go, you will not fall. You will float." As she walked away, the wind lifted her hair, and for a moment she felt as light as mist. Later that evening, the master walked alone by the sea. The tide was low, revealing the wet sand beneath his feet. He thought of all the people who had come to him, each one clinging to something, a memory, a dream, a fear. He saw that their suffering was not born from what they had lost, but from their refusal to let go. He looked up at the sky. Clouds were forming again. Somewhere inside them, new drops were gathering, preparing for their own journeys. He whispered to the wind, "We spend our lives fearing the fall, when the fall itself is the way home." That night, as he slept, he dreamed of being a raindrop. He felt the soft embrace of the cloud, the weight of waiting, the moment of release. He fell through the open sky, not with fear, but with peace. He became the ocean again, endless and free. When he woke, dawn had come. The air was cool, and a thin mist rose from the ground, curling gently toward the sky. He smiled, watching the vapor ascend, knowing that each particle would one day fall again, that everything returns in time. Years later, when the Master's own time came to leave the world, he told his disciples, "Do not grieve when I go. Clouds do not die when it rains. They only change their form. I will return as wind, as rain, as sunlight on your path. You will find me wherever you let go." His last words were soft. "Remember, you are not the drop, you are the water." And when he passed, the monks carried his body to the sea. They set a lantern upon the water and watched it drift until it vanished into the horizon. The tide moved gently, carrying it away, carrying everything away, just as it always had. The waves whispered their eternal lesson, that what we call loss is only transformation. The river becomes the ocean, the drop becomes the rain, the self becomes the whole. Far above, new clouds gathered, and inside them, tiny drops began to form once more. One of them trembled, unsure of the journey ahead. But somewhere deep within it was a quiet memory, a feeling of peace, of belonging, of having already touched something vast. And so it waited, not with fear, but with readiness. When the time came and the wind opened the sky, the little raindrop let go. It did not fall, it returned. And in that return was everything, the sky, the sea, and the eternal calm that lies beyond both. Because when we let go, we do not lose ourselves. We find that we were never separate at all. We were always part of the ocean. In a quiet temple nestled among cedar trees, far from the noise of villages and trade routes, there lived an abbot named Master Ryosen. He was known not for his strictness, but for his kindness. His wisdom was simple, quiet, and direct, like water finding its own path around stones. Under his care lived many monks, young and old, diligent and distracted, calm and restless. Among them was a novice named Jiro, a gentle-hearted but clumsy young man. He had come to the temple seeking peace, yet often found himself in trouble for small accidents. He spilled water during chores, forgot prayers, and once even knocked over an inkstone during morning study. But Master Ryosen never scolded him. Instead, he would smile softly and say, "When the cup tips, tea learns to flow." The other monks didn't always understand their master's patience. They whispered that the abbot favored Jiro. But the truth was simpler. Ryosen saw something in the boy, a sincere heart trying its best to awaken. In the abbot's quarters stood a porcelain bowl unlike any other in the temple. It was pale blue, its surface etched with a delicate pattern of cranes. The bowl had been a gift from the abbot's own teacher many decades ago, passed down through generations of masters. It was used only during morning tea. Every monk respected it deeply. None dared to touch it except the abbot himself. One morning, Master Ryosen called for Jiro. "Today," he said, "you will bring my bowl for tea." Jiro froze. "Me, Master? But I might drop it." The abbot smiled. "Then hold it with care." With trembling hands, Jiro bowed and went to fetch the bowl. His heart pounded as he entered the abbot's quarters. The morning light streamed through paper windows, falling across the porcelain surface. It seemed to glow with quiet dignity. He lifted it slowly, as though holding a piece of the sky. Step by step, he walked toward the garden, where the abbot waited beneath the maple tree. But just as he reached the veranda, his foot caught the edge of the wooden step. The bowl slipped from his hands. There was a sharp sound, soft yet final. The porcelain shattered on the floor. Pieces scattered like fragments of frozen light. For a long moment, everything was still. Jiro stood frozen, his breath caught in his chest. His mind went blank, then filled with dread. The world seemed to narrow until all he could see were the broken pieces glinting in the sunlight. He fell to his knees. His throat tightened. He wanted to gather the shards, to fix them somehow, to undo what had happened, but it was too late. When Master Ryosen entered the room, Jiro bowed low, his forehead nearly touching the ground. "Master," he whispered, "I am so sorry. I broke your bowl, the one from your teacher. I was not careful enough." The abbot stood silently. His eyes moved from Jiro to the pieces on the floor. Then, slowly, he smiled. "Ah," he said softly, "then the bowl is free too." Jiro looked up, confused. "Free, master?" Ryosen knelt beside the broken pieces. "Yes," he said, picking up one gently. "For many years this bowl has been bound by our care, by our fear of losing it. Every monk looked upon it with reverence, but also with tension. They thought, it must not break." He placed the shard back down and continued, "Now it has fulfilled its purpose. It has lived its life as a bowl, and now it is free to be something else. Why should we mourn that?" Jiro's eyes filled with tears. "But it was precious to you." The master nodded. "Yes, it was, but not because of what it was made of. It reminded me of my teacher, of lessons learned long ago. Yet my teacher is not in this bowl. He is here." He touched his chest. "And here." He gestured to the air. The bowl was only ever a vessel. It carried tea, and it carried memory. Now it carries a lesson. He looked at Jiro kindly. "And perhaps it carried you, too." The young monk bowed deeply. "I don't deserve your kindness, master." Ryosen smiled. "You didn't break the bowl out of carelessness. You broke it by living. Everything that lives breaks one day. What matters is not the breaking, it is what remains open afterward." That night, the temple was quiet. The moonlight spilled through the windows like water. Jiro could not sleep. He kept seeing the bowl fall, hearing the sound of its breaking. But the more he replayed it, the more he remembered his master's face, calm, gentle, untroubled. The next morning, as he swept the garden, he found Master Ryosen kneeling near the bamboo fence, gathering small fragments of the broken bowl from the dirt. "Master," Jiro said softly, "shouldn't we throw them away?" The abbot shook his head. "We will return them to the earth. Everything comes from dust and returns to dust, even porcelain." He dug a small hollow in the soil, placed the pieces inside, and covered them gently with sand. "The bowl will rest here," he said. "One day, rain will wash over it, the sun will warm it, and the earth will carry it onward." Jiro watched, feeling a deep peace settle in his chest. "Master," he asked after a long silence, "were you not attached to it at all?" Ryosen looked up, smiling faintly. "Attachment is like holding water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the less you keep. When you open your palm, the water rests there quietly." He paused, brushing the soil from his fingers. "When we are attached to things, they own us. We fear their loss so much that we stop living. But when we release that fear, everything becomes a gift. Each moment, each breath, even the sound of something breaking." Jiro nodded slowly. For the first time, he understood what his master had been teaching all along. Days turned into weeks. The monks continued their routines: meditation at dawn, chores at noon, chanting at dusk. But Jiro's heart had changed. He began to notice how fragile everything was: the blossoms falling from trees, the ripples vanishing in the pond, the cracks forming in old stone steps. Yet instead of sadness, he felt tenderness. One evening, as the monks ate supper, the abbot lifted his simple wooden bowl and said, "When we eat, we often think only of filling ourselves. But the bowl teaches us emptiness. It serves by holding, and when it is empty, it waits. The true purpose of a bowl is not to last forever, it is to serve completely." Jiro thought of the broken porcelain and smiled quietly. Years passed, and the story of the broken bowl became a quiet legend among the monks. It was told not as a tale of carelessness, but as a lesson about impermanence. New students who joined the temple would sometimes ask, "Is it true the abbot once forgave a monk for breaking his teacher's bowl?" The older monks would nod and say, "He did not forgive him, he thanked him." One day, long after the incident, a traveling scholar came to visit the temple. He had heard of Master Ryosen's wisdom and wanted to speak with him. During tea, the scholar noticed a small, rough clay bowl in front of the master. Its surface was uneven, its shape imperfect. "Forgive me, master," he said. But surely a man of your position would use finer vessels than this. Ryosen smiled. Once I had a very fine bowl, he said. It was perfect, smooth, beautiful, and irreplaceable. I treated it with great care. And then, one day, it broke. The scholar frowned. That must have been terrible. Not terrible, said the abbot. Liberating. Liberating? Ryosen nodded. Before it broke, I was its servant. I feared each moment I held it. After it broke, I was free. Now, I drink from this humble clay bowl, and every sip tastes the same as before. The tea has not changed, only my mind. The scholar bowed deeply. I understand, Master. Attachment is the true burden. Ryosen smiled again. Yes, we think attachment gives meaning, but it gives fear. When you let go, everything remains meaningful without needing to stay. When the scholar left, Jiro approached his master and said, I think I finally see the truth of your bowl. When it broke, it did not lose its value. It taught us what cannot be broken. Ryosen looked at him warmly. Exactly. The bowl's beauty was never in its perfection, but in its purpose. It held tea. It brought people together. And even in its breaking, it continued to teach. That is true perfection, something that never stops giving, even after it changes form. As the years passed, the abbot grew older. His hair turned white, his movements slower, but his eyes remained clear and bright. One winter, he fell ill and took to his bed. The monks cared for him with quiet devotion. One morning, as the snow fell softly outside, Jiro, now the senior monk, sat beside his teacher's bed. Master, he said softly, you once told me that everything breaks in its time. I am afraid that your time is near. Ryosen smiled faintly. Yes, Jiro. The body too is a bowl. It carries the spirit for a while, then it cracks, and the spirit is poured back into the great ocean. Tears filled Jiro's eyes. How do I live without you? The abbot reached out and took his hand. The same way you lived after the bowl broke, by seeing that nothing is ever truly lost. My words, my breath, my love for you, they will remain, not in form, but in essence. He paused to catch his breath. Remember, attachment breaks before things do. When you cling to what must pass, you suffer twice, once in fear and once in loss. But when you let go, even endings become gentle. Jiro bowed his head. Then your bowl was the first teaching. And this, he said through quiet tears, is the last. The abbot smiled. There are no first or last teachings. There is only one truth: everything changes, and that is why it is beautiful. That evening, as the snow deepened, Master Ryosen passed away peacefully. The temple bell rang once, echoing through the mountains. In spring, when the earth thawed, Jiro walked to the garden where they had buried the fragments of the broken bowl. Tiny shoots of grass had grown there, bright and green. He knelt and placed his hand on the soil. He whispered, Master, the bowl has returned to the earth, and so have you. He looked up at the sky, where clouds drifted slowly across the morning Sunday. A deep calm filled him. Years later, when Jiro became abbot himself, he used the same rough clay bowl his master once drank from. Every morning, as he poured tea, he would smile and say to the monks, This bowl will break one day. When it does, do not mourn it. Thank it for its service, and let it go. In its breaking, it will teach you freedom. And so the lesson of the bowl lived on, passed from teacher to student, not through porcelain, but through understanding. In the end, all things bowl, body, memory, are temporary vessels. But what they carry, when held with care and released without fear, becomes eternal. The true master's bowl is not made of porcelain or clay. It is made of awareness, unbreakable, ever-present, free. And when we finally learn to hold without clinging and release without regret, we discover the same truth: Master Ryosen saw in that shattered porcelain. Nothing is truly lost, only returned. In a mountain temple far from towns and roads, there lived an old monk named Kenji. He was known throughout the valley not for his sermons or writings, but for the way he walked. He walked slowly, lightly, as though the earth itself welcomed each step. For many years, Kenji had worn the same pair of sandals, simple ones made of woven straw. They had carried him over stone paths, forest trails, and temple floors, polished smooth by time. Every morning, before sunrise, he would slip them on and walk through the misty courtyard to ring the bell that called the other monks to meditation. The sandals were worn and frayed, their edges unraveling, but he treated them with quiet care, never complaining about their age. The younger monks often teased him gently. "Master," they would say, "surely you deserve new sandals. These look ready to fall apart." Kenji would smile and shake his head. "They still remember the shape of my feet," he would reply. "We have walked many miles together. They will tell me when they are ready to rest." And so, season after season, he wore them through winter's frost, through the first blossoms of spring, through the long rains of summer, and through the soft gold of autumn leaves. Each step became a prayer, each journey, a quiet conversation between the monk and the path beneath him. One crisp morning, Kenji set out before dawn to visit a neighboring temple across the valley. The air was cool and clear, and the moon still hung low in the sky. He walked slowly, as he always did, breathing in rhythm with the sound of his footsteps. Halfway through his journey, the straps of his sandals gave way. The straw had finally thinned beyond repair. One broke completely, and then the other followed. Kenji stood still on the dirt path, feeling the cool earth against his bare feet. He looked down at the sandals lying before him. For a long while, he said nothing. Then he bent down, picked them up gently, and placed them beside the path. "They have walked enough," he said softly. He took a deep breath, felt the ground beneath his soles, and continued on barefoot. When he arrived at the neighboring temple, a young monk greeted him at the gate. Seeing the elder's bare feet, he gasped, "Master Kenji, where are your sandals? Did you lose them?" Kenji smiled. "No," he said. "I set them free." The young monk looked puzzled. "Free? But don't you need them?" "The road is full of stones." Kenji nodded. "Yes, but the road and I will learn from each other. My sandals serve me well, but everything has its time. Peace comes when we know when something's journey with us is done." The young monk frowned slightly, unsure what the old man meant. Later that day, as they drank tea together, he asked again, "Master, how did you know it was time to let them go?" Kenji smiled gently. "The same way one knows when a leaf must fall, or when a bell must stop ringing. The leaf doesn't cling to the branch, and the bell doesn't try to echo forever. Everything ends when its purpose is complete. The sandals had carried me faithfully through many years. They had fulfilled their purpose. To ask more of them would be unkind." The young monk bowed his head. "But you must miss them." Kenji laughed softly. "Miss them, perhaps. But missing is only another way of holding on. When something leaves you, it leaves a space. Most people rush to fill that space with sorrow. But if you leave it open, peace enters." The young monk sat quietly, letting the words sink in. That evening, when Kenji returned to his temple, the other monks noticed his bare feet. "Master," one exclaimed, "your sandals! What happened?" Kenji looked down at his feet, now dusty and scratched from the long walk. "They have gone on," he said simply. "They walked their last step." Another monk frowned. "We could have mended them for you." Kenji shook his head. "To mend what has completed its purpose is to resist its rest. Not all things need repair. Some simply need release." That night, the monks gathered in the meditation hall. but many found their minds drifting to the old sandals lying somewhere on the road. Only Kenji sat still, his posture as calm as a lake at dawn. After the meditation, one monk approached him. "Master, I cannot stop thinking about your sandals. You walked barefoot all the way home. Doesn't it hurt?" Kenji smiled. "Of course it hurts, but pain is not always an enemy. The earth beneath our feet has its own lessons. The sandals taught me comfort. The ground teaches me resilience. Both are teachers, each in their time." The monk bowed deeply. "Then when something is gone, should we never try to replace it?" Kenji thought for a moment. Replace? Yes, perhaps one day, but not to fill a void. When something truly ends, don't rush to cover the silence it leaves. Wait, listen. Often the silence itself becomes the next teaching. The next morning, the old monk began his daily chores barefoot. He swept the courtyard, tended the garden, and carried water from the well. The stones were cold beneath his feet, but he moved gently, without complaint. The younger monks watched him in quiet awe. After a few days, one of them brought a new pair of sandals he had made from fresh straw. "Master," he said, bowing, "these are for you." Kenji accepted them with gratitude, holding them in his hands. "You made them well," he said, "but I will not wear them yet." "Why not?" the young monk asked. Kenji looked toward the path outside the temple gate. "Because my feet are still learning to walk without them. Before I wear new shoes, I must remember what it means to walk free." And so, for many days more, he continued barefoot. He walked through mud and rain, through heat and frost, until his feet hardened and adjusted. Each step became an act of gratitude. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, a visiting traveler stopped at the temple. Seeing the old monk barefoot, he laughed kindly. "Old man, have you lost your sandals?" Kenji smiled. "No, I lost my need for them," the traveler chuckled. "But why make life harder? The ground is rough, the stones sharp." Kenji nodded. "Yes, but sometimes the softest heart grows on the roughest road." The traveler shook his head in amusement. "You monks always have strange wisdom." Kenji smiled again. "It is not strange. The world is full of teachers. Even worn sandals can whisper truth." That night, as the traveler slept in the guest quarters, he dreamt of walking barefoot along a wide path. When he woke, he could still feel the cool earth beneath his feet. Days later, he left the temple with a lighter pack. Among the things he discarded was an old pair of boots he had carried for years, too tight and too worn to use. As he placed them by the roadside, he remembered Kenji's words. They have walked enough. Years passed, and the story of the old monk and his sandals spread across the mountains. Travelers who came to the temple would sometimes find Kenji sitting by the garden pond, mending robes or feeding birds. They would ask, "Master, is it true you gave up your sandals and walked barefoot for months?" Kenji would laugh softly. "It is true. Was it difficult?" they would ask. "At first," he would say, "the stones hurt, the ground burned in summer and froze in winter. But over time, my feet learned what the sandals had once known. And I learned what they had been teaching me all along. And what was that? That everything has a time to serve and a time to rest. Nothing we hold lasts forever, not sandals, not possessions, not even people. The peace we seek comes not from keeping, but from knowing when to let go." He would pause then, his gaze drifting to the pond where fallen leaves floated gently on the surface. "See those leaves?" he would say. "All summer, they clung to the tree, they gave shade, they turned sunlight into life. But now they drift away. The tree does not mourn them. It stands still and waits for new growth." The travelers would leave, feeling as if they had learned something without quite knowing what. As Kenji grew older, his steps became slower. His hair turned silver, and his voice softened with age, but the light in his eyes never dimmed. Even when his body began to ache, he continued his morning walks through the courtyard, barefoot as ever. One spring morning, as cherry blossoms fell like soft snow, a young novice named Taro joined him. They walked together in silence for a while before Taro asked, "Master, aren't your feet tired after all these years?" Kenji smiled. "They are tired, yes, but they are grateful. They have carried me long enough. One day, they too will rest." Taro looked down at the old man's calloused feet. "And when that day comes?" Kenji looked at the horizon. "Then I will thank them for their service, the same way I thanked my sandals." That evening, Kenji sat in the garden watching the sun set behind the mountains. He thought about all that had passed, friends who had come and gone, the sandals that had worn away, the paths he had walked, the seasons that had turned like pages. Nothing had stayed the same, yet nothing had been truly lost. He whispered to himself, "Each thing walks beside us only as long as it must. When it leaves peace behind." Not long after, the old monk became ill. The other monks cared for him tenderly, keeping watch by his side. One night, as the sound of rain filled the temple, Kenji opened his eyes and said softly, "Do you hear it? The rain has walked far enough. Soon it will rest in the earth." The monks leaned closer. "Master, do you have any last words for us?" Kenji smiled faintly. "Yes. Do not be afraid when things wear out your shoes, your strength, even your days. Everything completes its journey. When something ends, bow to it. It has walked enough." When the dawn came, Kenji's breathing had grown still. His face was peaceful, his hands folded over his chest. The monks washed his body, and when they lifted his robe, they saw his bare feet scarred, strong, and beautiful. After the funeral, the monks placed a small pair of handmade sandals beside his shrine. On a strip of paper, they wrote his words, "They have walked enough." And every year, when a monk's sandals wore out, he would leave them by the temple gate instead of mending them. Travelers who passed by would see rows of old sandals resting by the entrance, and they would ask, "Why so many?" The monks would smile and answer, "Because even sandals have a journey. When they are done, we let them rest." Over time, the temple became known as the House of the Peaceful Step. Pilgrims came from far away to walk barefoot across its courtyard, feeling the earth beneath their feet, remembering the old monk who taught that peace is not found in holding on, but in knowing when to let go. And so, long after Kenji's last walk, his wisdom continued to echo in every footstep that touched the temple's ground. Peace is knowing when something's journey with you is done. There was once a monk named Tamon who lived in a quiet mountain temple surrounded by a grove of bamboo. The temple was small and humble, with moss-covered stones and a stream that sang softly as it flowed past. Each morning, Tamon swept the paths, tended the garden, and sat beneath the bamboo to meditate. He loved their calm strength, the way they rose straight toward the sky, slender yet unshakable, and how they moved with the wind instead of resisting it. He often thought, the bamboo never fights the storm, yet it survives every season. But Tamon himself was not as gentle as the grove he admired. He had come to the temple as a young man full of will and determination. He believed that enlightenment was something he could earn through effort, by mastering discipline, by sitting perfectly still, by holding himself firm against every distraction. He wanted to become strong, unmoving, untouchable. Each day, he sat longer than the others in meditation. When the temple bell rang for meals, he stayed behind. When his legs burned with pain, he told himself to endure it. He believed peace could only be won by conquering the body and silencing the mind. One morning, as the sun rose over the hills, the abbot found him sitting among the bamboo, motionless as stone. "Tamon," he said kindly, "you have been here since before dawn. Does your heart feel quiet?" Tamon opened his eyes. "Not yet, master," he said. "My thoughts still wander. I am determined to stop them." The old abbot smiled softly. "Be careful. Even the strongest bamboo bends with the wind. If it stood rigid, it would break." Tamon bowed but did not understand. He believed that stillness meant control. That summer, storms swept through the valley. The sky turned dark, and the wind howled day and night. The monks stayed indoors, but Tamon went out to meditate beneath the bamboo. He sat cross-legged on the wet earth, spine stiff, eyes closed, while the rain fell around him. The wind grew stronger, bending the bamboo until they brushed against him. One snapped nearby with a sharp crack. Tamon opened his eyes. In the dim light, he saw the grove alive in the storm, some stalks bending low, almost touching the ground, others standing stubborn and breaking under the pressure. He sat there, watching. The ones that yielded survived. The ones that refused to move were torn apart. For the first time, Tamon saw what his master had meant. His heart softened. He bowed his head to the rain. "To yield is not weakness," he whispered. "It is wisdom." When morning came, the storm had passed. The ground was covered with broken bamboo, yet the grove still stood tall. The bending stalks had risen again, unshaken. Tamon stayed among them long after sunrise, quietly absorbing their lesson. When the abbot found him, Tamon looked up with calm eyes. "Master," he said, "I finally see. The bamboo that bent now stands tall. The ones that resisted have fallen." The abbot nodded. "So it is with us. The wind teaches what the heart forgets. Strength without softness breaks itself." From that day, Tamon's meditation changed. He no longer forced his body to be still or his thoughts to disappear. He sat as the bamboo stood upright, alive, yet open to the wind. When anger came, he let it blow through him. When sorrow rose, he bowed to it. He learned to yield without losing his roots. Over time, peace began to settle within him, gentle as morning mist. Years passed, and Tamon became known for his quiet grace. He worked slowly, spoke softly, and smiled often. The monks began to come to him for guidance. One day, a young monk approached him in distress. "Master Tamon," he said, "I failed my duty today. I dropped the water jar, and it shattered. I wanted so much to be careful, but my hands were clumsy. Now I feel ashamed." Tamon looked at him with kind eyes. "Do you see the bamboo outside?" he asked. The novice nodded. "When the wind blows, it does not curse the storm," Tamon said. "It bends and waits. You too must bend. Accept your mistake. Bow to it. Then let it go. If you cling to your shame, it will break you. But if you bow, you will rise again." The young monk wept softly. "But I feel so weak." Tamon smiled. "Weakness is when we cannot bow. Strength is when we do." The boy bowed low and left with a lighter heart. That evening, Tamon sat once more beneath the bamboo. The moonlight fell across the grove, silver and soft. He listened to the wind move gently through the leaves. It whispered to him of the truth. He had finally learned that peace is not the stillness of stone, but the calm that sways with life. Many years later, after his master passed away, Tamon became abbot of the temple. People came from distant places to hear his wisdom. One day, a samurai arrived, seeking counsel. "Master," he said, bowing deeply, "I have lived by strength all my life. I do not fear battle, yet I cannot sleep. My heart is full of tension. Teach me peace." Tamon led him to the bamboo grove. The wind was gentle that day, the stalks swaying like dancers. "Tell me," Tamon said, "what happens when a sword meets another sword?" "They clash," the samurai answered. "The stronger one wins." Tamon bent a stalk of bamboo and let it spring back. "And what happens when a sword strikes this?" The warrior watched in silence. "It cuts nothing," he said. Taman smiled. "The bamboo yields, and so it remains whole. When life strikes you, do not fight back with steel. Yield, and you will not break." The samurai frowned. "But if I yield, I will lose." "No," said Taman. "You only lose when you resist what cannot be changed. The river does not fight the rock. It flows around it and wears it away with time. The one who bends walks farther than the one who stands proud." The samurai stayed at the temple for many days, learning to breathe, to listen, to sit quietly. When he finally left, he bowed to Tamon. "Master," he said, "I came here to learn strength. Instead, I learned how to bow. And in bowing, I have found my strength." Tamon smiled. "The bamboo bends in every storm, yet it still reaches the sky." As the years passed, Tamon grew old. His hair turned white, his body thin, but his presence was steady, like a calm breeze through leaves. Every morning he walked to the grove and sat beneath the tallest stalks. Even when the wind was fierce, he sat without fear. One winter, the monks awoke to find snow piled high upon the bamboo. The younger ones panicked. "Master," they cried, "the weight will break them." Taman joined them outside. The grove bowed low under the snow's heavy touch. "Watch," he said quietly. As the monks stood in silence, one stalk began to tremble. The snow slid off, and the bamboo sprang upright again. Then another and another. Soon the grove was alive with sound, each stalk releasing its burden, rising toward the Sunday. "Do you see?" Taman said. "They bow under the weight, and when the time comes, they rise. This is the secret of peace. Life will press upon you. Let it. Do not fight the burden, let it teach you how to yield. When the storm passes, you will stand taller." The monks bowed deeply, understanding. That spring, Taman fell ill. He grew weaker each day, but his spirit remained bright. When a novice came to sit beside him, Tamon whispered, "All my life I tried to be unbending. It was the bamboo that taught me to bow. When you learn to yield, you learn to live." "Master," the boy asked softly, "what happens when you can no longer rise?" Taman smiled faintly. "Then we become part of the wind." The next morning, the old monk was gone. His body lay still, his face peaceful. The monks buried him at the edge of the bamboo grove. That night, as the wind moved through the stalks, it sounded like a soft voice whispering his teaching again and again. Years passed, and the bamboo continued to grow. It swayed with the wind, bowed under snow, and rose again each spring. Travelers who came to the temple would ask about the grave among the stalks. The monks would say, "That is where Master Taman rests. He taught us that to yield is not weakness, it is wisdom." And each time the wind rustled through the grove, those who listened carefully could almost hear his words carried in the air. This story reminds us of one of Zen's simplest but deepest truths. Peace is not found by resisting what comes, but by moving with it. We live in a world that teaches us to be strong, to hold firm, to fight every storm. But strength without softness is brittleness, and life will always find its way through what refuses to bend. When we yield to change, to loss, to the winds of life, we do not surrender our spirit. We allow life to pass through us instead of breaking us. To yield is to trust that we will rise again when the storm is over. So tonight, as you lie down to rest, think of the bamboo grove. Feel your breath moving in and out like wind through leaves. Whatever weight you carry, let yourself bow beneath it. You are not giving up, you are letting go, because the wind always passes and the bamboo always rises again. There was once a monastery that sat high on a mountain ridge, where the clouds drifted so low they often brushed the temple roof. On certain mornings, when the mist rolled across the valley and the world looked soft and half-formed, the monks would pause their work to watch the clouds change shape in the wind. Among the monks was a young student named Rika. He had come to the monastery seeking clarity and peace, but his heart often wavered between calm and longing. He admired the beauty of things, flowers, sunsets, the sound of the bell, but each time something faded, a sadness stirred in him. One morning, as he swept the temple courtyard, Rika looked up and saw a cloud unlike any he had ever seen. It stretched long across the sky, curling into the shape of a dragon. Its wings seemed to spread wide, its head rising proudly above the peaks. Sunlight caught its edges, making it shimmer like silver. He dropped his broom and stared, captivated. "How perfect," he whispered. "It looks alive." At that moment, his teacher, Master Rin, stepped quietly into the courtyard. He followed the student's gaze and smiled. "What do you see, Rika?" the master asked. "A dragon, master. Look at it, so grand, so real. It's as if the heavens themselves have painted it." Rin nodded. "Yes, the sky is a fine artist." They stood together in silence, watching as the cloud drifted slowly across the blue expanse. But when Rika blinked, the dragon's head began to fade. A gust of wind scattered its long body into thin wisps. Within moments, only a faint blur remained. Rika's face fell. "It's gone." The master turned to him gently. "Do not mourn what changes," he said. "That is its nature, and yours." The young monk lowered his eyes, feeling foolish. Yet the image of the dragon lingered in his mind long after it vanished. He thought about it as he swept, as he ate, and even as he meditated that evening. The more he tried to let it go, the more clearly he saw it. That night, he sought out his master. "Teacher," he said, "why did your words trouble me so much? You said not to mourn what changes, but I can't stop thinking about that cloud. It was so beautiful, and then it was gone. I know it's foolish to grieve something so small, but I feel as though I lost something precious." Master Rin poured 2 cups of tea and set one before the student. The candlelight flickered between them. "Tell me," the master said, "what made the cloud beautiful to you?" Rika thought for a moment. "Its shape, I suppose. The way it looked like a dragon." "Then where is that beauty now?" the master asked. Rika frowned. "Gone, I suppose." Rin shook his head. "No, not gone. The beauty was never in the shape, it was in the seeing. You found beauty because your heart was awake in that moment. The cloud changed, but your capacity to see did not." The student sat in silence. The tea between them steamed gently. The master continued, "You think the loss of the cloud is sorrow, but sorrow comes not from change, it comes from holding on to what refuses to stay. You grasped the dragon with your mind, and when it moved on, you called it loss. But the sky loses nothing when a cloud dissolves." Rika lowered his eyes. "It's hard not to cling, master." Rin smiled kindly. "Yes, it is hard. The mind loves to hold shapes, it loves to make permanence out of passing things. But the more tightly you hold, the more you suffer. When you learn to let each thing come and go as it will, life becomes soft again, like the sky." That night, Rika lay awake, listening to the wind. He imagined the dragon cloud drifting beyond the mountain, becoming rain, mist, and air. He wondered if he could ever see things without wanting them to stay. In the days that followed, he began to observe the world differently. When the cherry blossoms fell from the trees, he watched them scatter instead of sighing for their loss. When the rain washed away footprints in the path, he thought of the sky cleaning itself. He tried, each time something changed, to see not the disappearance, but the transformation. Still, his mind sometimes rebelled. He would remember the shape of the dragon and wish it would appear again. He would climb the hill at dawn, hoping to see another cloud like it. But though the skies were full of beauty, none ever took that same form. One evening, while tending the temple lamps, Rika spoke again to his master. "I understand what you taught me. yet part of me still yearns for what once was. I think of that dragon and feel something like longing. Does that mean I have failed? Rin shook his head. No, it means you are human. To love beauty is natural, but to demand that beauty remain is illusion. When you can love the moment and release it with gratitude, then you will see that nothing is ever truly lost. It only changes its name. He gestured to the flame of the lamp. Look at this fire. If I move my hand, the flame flickers. The shape changes with every breath of air, yet it is still fire. Change is the movement of life itself. To wish it still is to wish the world lifeless. Reika bowed. Then the problem is not that things change, but that I want them to stay. The master nodded. Yes, you confuse stillness with peace, but true peace does not depend on stillness. It exists in the flow itself. That night, the sky cleared. Reika walked alone into the courtyard. Above him, clouds drifted slowly across the stars, thin ribbons, shifting forms, endless motion. He stood there for a long time, breathing in the cool air, watching them come and go. For a brief moment, one cloud took the shape of a bird, its wings stretched wide. Reika smiled. He blinked, and it was gone. This time, his heart did not ache. He simply whispered, "Thank you," and bowed to the empty sky. Years passed. Reika grew older and wiser, eventually becoming a teacher himself. His students admired his calmness and gentle humor. He seemed to hold the world lightly, as though every moment rested easily in his hands. One day, a young monk came to him with tears in his eyes. "Master Reika," he said, "I feel so much sorrow. My friend has left the temple. We trained together for years, and now he has gone to teach elsewhere. I know I should be happy for him, but I feel empty." Reika led him outside. The afternoon sun was low, and the sky was painted with clouds long, soft shapes stretching across the horizon. "Tell me," Reika said, "what do you see in the sky?" The young monk wiped his eyes. "I see a cloud shaped like a mountain. And will it stay that way?" Reika asked. The student shook his head. "No, master, it will change." Reika nodded. "Yes, but while it is here, can you appreciate it?" The young monk looked up again. "Yes, it's beautiful." Reika smiled. "Then do the same for your friend. People, like clouds, come into our lives, take a shape that brings meaning, and then drift on. To love them does not mean to hold them still, it means to bless their movement." The student bowed deeply, tears falling again, but this time they were softer. "Then I should not mourn what changes." "No," Reika said. "To mourn endlessly is to fight the sky. The sky never resists. It lets every cloud come and go, and because of that, it is vast." The boy smiled faintly. "Then peace is like the sky." "Yes," Reika said, "and you are that sky." That evening, as the monks gathered for meditation, the air grew heavy with mist. Clouds rolled low over the temple roof. Some of the younger monks whispered that it looked as though the heavens were resting upon their home. Reika sat with them, listening to the soft rain that began to fall. He spoke quietly. Each drop of rain was once part of a cloud. Each cloud was once vapor rising from the sea. Nothing is ever lost, it only changes its form. Remember this when sorrow visits you. Change is not your enemy, it is the breath of existence. As the rain fell, the monks sat in silence. The sound of droplets against the wooden floor became their teacher that night. When Reika grew old, he spent his final years watching the sky from the temple balcony. Sometimes the other monks would find him there at dawn, smiling faintly as clouds drifted through shades of pink and gold. One morning, a student approached him. "Master," he asked, "after all these years, what have you learned from the clouds?" Reika looked at the horizon, where the light of morning was dissolving the night. "That everything I have ever loved has changed," he said, "and yet nothing has truly gone." The student bowed. "I don't understand." Reika smiled. When the cloud disappears, the sky remains. When you lose what you love, what remains is what allowed you to love in the first place, the open space within you. That is your true nature. Like the sky, you can hold every passing shape without clinging to any. Not long after, Master Reika passed away peacefully in his sleep. The monks buried him at the top of the mountain, where the clouds drifted closest to the earth. On the day of his burial, the sky was full of movement clouds forming, breaking, merging, scattering. As the monks chanted, one of them looked up and saw a great cloud shaped like a dragon stretching across the heavens. He smiled and whispered to the others, "The master is here." The cloud glowed for a moment in the sunlight, then slowly dissolved into the blue. The monks bowed deeply. None felt sadness. The master had taught them too well. They returned to their temple in silence, the wind gentle on their faces. That night, as the stars appeared, one young monk looked to the sky and said quietly, "Do not mourn what changes. That is its nature and ours." This story reminds us of one of Zen's deepest truths: all things are in motion. The sky never keeps a single cloud, the sea never holds a single wave, and we cannot hold a single moment of life. Everything we love, everything we are, is always moving, forming, fading, returning. To mourn what changes is to fight the current of existence. To accept it is to find peace. The world was never meant to stand still. Its beauty lives in its passing. When we release our grasp, we begin to see that change is not the loss of what was, it is the continuation of what is. The cloud that disappears becomes rain, the rain becomes river, the river returns to the sea. Nothing is lost. It only becomes something new. As you prepare to rest tonight, you might think of the sky above you. The thoughts that come and go in your mind are clouds too. Some take beautiful shapes, others darken the horizon, but none stay for long. Watch them drift. Let them move as they will. You are not the clouds. You are the sky that holds them all. Do not mourn what changes. That is its nature and yours. In an old temple nestled deep in the mountains, where the mist lingered even after sunrise, there stood a bell tower. The bell was large and ancient, made of bronze darkened by years of rain and prayer. Monks said its sound could travel across valleys, through forests, and even reach the hearts of travelers far beyond the temple walls. Every dawn, when the sun touched the mountain peaks, the bell would ring slow, deep, and full of grace. Its sound carried through the morning air, calling the monks to meditation. The bell did not just mark time, it awakened something within those who heard it. One day, a young monk named Daiichi was assigned the duty of ringing the morning bell. It was a great honor, for only those trusted by the master could be given this task. Daiichi was eager to prove himself. He rose before dawn, climbed the worn steps of the tower, and bowed before the great bell. It hung motionless, covered in dew. The air was so still that he could hear his own breath. He took the wooden beam used to strike it and swung it gently, but the bell made no sound. He frowned and tried again, harder this time. Still, nothing. The silence felt heavy, almost mocking. He examined the bell closely and discovered that the clapper, the piece inside that struck the metal from within, was missing. It must have fallen and been taken away for repair. Daiichi felt a rush of panic. The temple depended on the sound of this bell to begin its day. Without it, the morning ritual would be incomplete. He swung the beam again and again, each time harder than before, hoping to coax some echo from the stubborn metal, but all he heard was the dull thud of wood hitting bronze. The silence grew louder in his mind. Frustrated, he struck it one last time, so hard that the sound of his effort filled the tower. The bell, however, remained mute. At that moment, he heard a soft voice behind him. "Why do you strike so violently, Daiichi?" It was the master, standing at the doorway, his robe rippling slightly in the wind. "Master!" Daichi bowed quickly. "The bell will not ring, its clapper is gone. I thought perhaps if I struck it hard enough, the sound might still come." The master smiled gently and walked closer. "And what did you hear?" Daichi hesitated. "Nothing, master. Only silence." The old man nodded. "Then you have heard more than you realize." Daichi looked puzzled. "But master, the purpose of a bell is to ring. Without its sound, it fails in its duty. I have failed in mine." The master placed a hand on the bell. "Is it the bell that has failed?" he asked softly. "Or your expectation of what it should do?" Daichi said nothing. He looked down at his hands, still trembling from the effort. "Even silence," the master said, "is a sound if you listen without wanting." He let the words linger in the air. Then, without another word, he turned and left the tower. Daichi stood there for a long time. The wind moved gently through the open window, carrying the faint scent of pine. He sat down on the wooden floor and closed his eyes. At first, all he could hear was his own heartbeat. Then, slowly, other sounds began to reveal themselves. The rustle of bamboo leaves outside, the soft creak of the tower's beams, the sigh of the wind moving through the valley. Beneath it all was the vastness of silence itself, deep, unbroken, infinite. He realized that he had been so focused on the bell's voice that he had ignored all the other voices around him. Later that morning, during meditation, the master spoke to the monks. "There are two kinds of hearing," he said. "The first is with the ears. It seeks sound, compares, judges, and desires. The second is with the heart. It listens to what is, even when there is nothing to hear. When the heart listens, silence sings." Daichi bowed his head, understanding the lesson was for him. In the days that followed, he returned to the bell tower each morning. Though the clapper was still missing, he no longer tried to strike the bell. Instead, he sat beside it and listened to the wind brushing its surface, to the small insects crawling in the cracks, to the sound of his own breathing. At first, it felt strange. The silence was not what he expected. It had layers soft and shifting, full of life he had never noticed. He began to feel that the bell was speaking after all, just not in a way he had been taught to hear. One morning, as the sun rose, Daichi watched the first light touch the bronze. He whispered to himself, "You ring in your own way." When the temple carpenter finally came to replace the clapper, Daichi found himself hesitant. He wondered if he wanted the sound to return. Yet when the bell was whole again, and its deep tone filled the valley once more, he smiled. It was beautiful, but so was the silence that had come before. Later that day, Daichi approached his master. When the bell was silent, he said, "I felt frustrated at first, but over time I began to hear something beyond sound. It was as if the world itself was ringing." The master nodded. "Yes, the world is full of bells that have no clappers, trees, rivers, stones, even your breath. You must learn to hear their music." Daichi bowed. "I think I understand now, master. But tell me, why does silence feel so different from sound?" The master smiled. "Because sound fills space, but silence reveals it. Sound ends, but silence remains. When you stop demanding one, you begin to appreciate the other." That evening, Daichi went to the temple garden. The monks were watering plants and sweeping paths, their movements quiet and steady. He closed his eyes and listened not for words or songs, but for what lived between them. He heard the sweep of a broom, the dripping of water, the call of a distant bird. Yet more than these, he felt a deep stillness connecting them all. It was as if every sound rose from silence and returned to it again, like waves to the sea. Days turned into weeks, and Daichi's heart grew calmer. He began to notice how much of his life had been spent chasing noise approval, success, understanding. He realized he had wanted life to ring for him as the bell once had. But life, like the bell, did not always sound on command. One afternoon, as the monks gathered for their lesson, the master held up an empty bowl. "This bowl," he said, "can be filled with rice, water, or air. Its emptiness makes it useful. In the same way, silence makes sound possible. If you cling to noise, you lose both the bowl and its purpose." He paused and looked around the room. "If you truly wish to hear the world, listen not for what is added, but for what remains." That night, Daichi could not sleep. The rain began to fall outside, steady and rhythmic. He listened, not trying to name or measure it, simply allowing it to exist. Eventually, he drifted into sleep with the sound of rain and silence woven together, like two notes forming a single harmony. Years passed, and Daichi became a teacher himself. He was known not for his speeches, but for his silences. Students came to him for wisdom, but often he would sit quietly with them, saying nothing for a long time. One impatient novice once asked, "Master Daichi, why do you remain silent so often? Shouldn't a teacher speak?" Daichi smiled. "A teacher speaks when words are useful. Silence teaches when they are not." The novice frowned. "But how can silence teach anything?" Daichi gestured toward the bell tower. "When I was young, I tried to make that bell ring without its clapper. I struck it again and again until my master stopped me. He said, 'Even silence is a sound if you listen without wanting.' I spent years learning what that meant. Would you like to hear the silent bell?" The novice nodded. Together they climbed the tower. The air was still, the valley blanketed in fog. Daichi placed his hand on the bell and said nothing. After a moment, the novice began to notice small things, the wind brushing the wood, the faint hum of insects, the rhythm of their breathing. The silence grew wider, deeper. Daichi smiled. "Do you hear it now?" The boy looked confused. I hear many things, but no bell." Daichi nodded. "That is the bell. You are hearing what has always been here. The bell only reminds you to listen." The novice bowed his head. "Then the world is always ringing?" "Yes," Daichi said softly. "Only our wanting makes it seem quiet." From then on, the boy often came to the bell tower to sit in silence. He learned to listen to the stillness until it no longer felt empty, but full alive with invisible music. Years later, when Daichi grew old, he spent much of his time there as well. The monks often found him sitting by the bell, eyes closed, smiling faintly. They asked him once what he was listening to. "The world," he said. "It has much to say when you stop trying to make it speak." On the morning of his death, the bell was struck for the dawn ceremony. Its sound rolled across the valley, deep and strong. The monks later said that, for a moment, it sounded different, softer, fuller, almost as if silence itself had joined in. When they found Daichi's body, he was sitting by the bell, peaceful, his hands folded in his lap. A gentle wind moved through the open window, carrying the faint hum of the world waking up. The master's words echoed in the hearts of his students for years afterward. "Even silence is a sound if you listen without wanting." This story reminds us of a truth easy to forget, that peace is not found in what we add to life, but in what we stop demanding from it. We spend our days striking the bell of existence, hoping it will sing the tune we desire: success, comfort, understanding. But when we listen without wanting, we hear something greater than any sound, the quiet rhythm of being itself. Silence is not the absence of life. It is the space that holds everything together. When we stop chasing noise, outer or inner, we begin to hear what has always been speaking to us. As you prepare to rest tonight, you might listen for the silent bell within your own breath. Feel the stillness between your heartbeats. Notice the quiet beneath every sound. You don't need to make life ring for you. It already does, in its own way. Even silence is a sound if you listen without wanting. In a small monastery surrounded by rice fields and gentle hills, there lived an old monk who was known for his patience and quiet wisdom. Each morning, he carried 2 pots suspended from a wooden pole across his shoulders to fetch water from the stream that flowed below the hill. One pot was perfect, smooth, even, and well balanced. The other had a long crack running down its side. It leaked a little with every step. Each day, the old monk filled both pots to the brim. By the time he reached the temple, the perfect pot was full, but the cracked one was only half so. The monks who saw him often whispered, wondering why he kept using a pot that wasted water. The cracked pot itself knew of its flaw. It noticed how little water it carried compared to its companion. Day after day, it watched the old monk pour the same water into the same well, ashamed that it had given less than the other pot. One morning, as the monk was preparing for his walk to the stream, the cracked pot spoke softly. "Master," it said, "I am ashamed." The monk smiled, surprised but not startled. "Ashamed? Why? Each day you carry me to the stream, and each day I return half empty. The other pot does its duty perfectly, but I fail you. I have tried to hold the water, but I cannot. You should replace me with one that is whole." The old monk looked at the pot with kindness in his eyes. "You think you fail because you are cracked?" "Yes," said the pot sadly. "I waste what you work for. I am broken." The monk said nothing. He lifted the pole across his shoulders and began walking toward the stream as usual. "Watch the path carefully today," he said. The pot did as it was told. The morning sun filtered through the bamboo trees, casting dappled light across the ground. On one side of the path, everything was dry and dusty, but on the other, wild flowers of every color bloomed, soft purple and yellow, pinks and whites swaying in the gentle breeze. When they reached the stream, the monk filled both pots again, turned back, and began the climb up the hill. As they walked, the cracked pot looked once more at the flowers lining its side of the path. They were bright and full of life, bending slightly toward the morning light. When they reached the temple, the monk set the pole down and said, "Now, tell me, pot, what did you see?" "I saw the flowers," said the cracked pot quietly. "They were beautiful, but I do not understand what they have to do with me." The monk smiled. "You do not know? Those flowers grow because of you. Every day, as we walk back from the stream, the water that leaks from your side falls onto the soil. I planted those seeds long ago, knowing your crack would water them. For 2 years they have grown, brightening our path and filling the air with fragrance. Without your flaw, there would be no flowers." The cracked pot fell silent. The monk continued, "You think of your crack as a weakness, something to be ashamed of. But through that crack, life has flowed. The perfect pot carries water, but it waters nothing. You, my friend, have fed the earth." The pot listened to the wind rustling through the flowers, and for the first time, it did not feel broken. It felt whole in a way it never had before. That evening, when the sun set behind the hills, the old monk walked the same path again. He stopped to look at the blossoms glowing softly in the fading light. He whispered, "Perfection serves itself. Flaws serve the world." From that day onward, the cracked pot no longer compared itself to the other. It accepted its crack, knowing it gave more than it lost. The next morning, a young monk, who had been watching the old man for some time, asked, "Master, why do you keep that broken pot? Wouldn't it be easier to use one that holds all the water?" The master smiled. "If I only valued what holds perfectly, I would miss what overflows beautifully. This pot may lose half its water, but it gives the earth twice its life." The young monk tilted his head. "But isn't it better to be strong and whole?" "Strength is not always in holding," the master said gently. "Sometimes it is in releasing. The pot releases, and the flowers drink. In this way, even imperfection finds its purpose." The young monk thought about that for a long time. Years went by, and the cracked pot continued its daily walk. The flowers multiplied, spreading further along the path. Travelers who visited the temple often paused to admire them. They would say, "What a beautiful garden," and the old monk would simply nod. He never spoke of the pot. He let the flowers tell the story. One season, the old monk grew ill. His steps became slower, his shoulders bent lower. One morning, as he filled the pots, his hands trembled slightly. The cracked pot, seeing his frailty, felt worry bloom in its heart. "Master," it said softly, "you have carried me for so long. Perhaps it is time you rested. Let someone younger take your place." The monk smiled. "I will soon rest, my friend, but I could not leave without my walk to the stream. It reminds me that even when things appear broken, life finds a way to bloom." They walked in silence that morning, the flowers brushing against the monk's robe. When they reached the temple, the monk set the pots down and looked at them for a long moment. "Each of us," he whispered, "is both whole and cracked. What we call broken is only the place where light and life can enter." That evening, the monk passed away peacefully in his sleep. When the monks found him, they saw the 2 pots by his bedside, still filled halfway with water from that morning's walk. One was perfect. The other, cracked, shimmered in the sunlight streaming through the window. The new abbot, a student of the old monk, kept the 2 pots in the garden. He told the younger monks, "Our master taught us through everything, even through a pot. Look closely. What you see as damage may be the very thing through which the world is blessed." Over time, the cracked pot became a quiet symbol in the temple. Each novice who joined the monastery would learn its story. Whenever someone felt unworthy, too slow, too emotional, too flawed, the abbot would take them to the garden. He would gesture to the flowers and say, "Do you see these blooms? They drink from imperfection. The world grows from what you think is wrong with you." One day, a new novice named Shin was struggling with his studies. He was clumsy, forgetful, and easily distracted. After spilling ink across a sacred text, he wept in shame. The abbot found him sitting outside, head bowed. "Why so sad, Shin?" "I cannot do anything right," the boy said. "My hands shake when I copy scriptures. I forget chants during meditation. I'm useless here." The abbot placed a hand on his shoulder. "Come with me." He led the boy along the garden path where flowers still grew wild from the cracked pot's side. The scent of blossoms filled the air. The abbot stopped and pointed. "Do you see this?" he asked. "Yes, master, it's beautiful." The abbot nodded. It was born from a flaw. There was once a pot that leaked. The water it lost gave these flowers life. The pot thought it was failing until my teacher showed it the truth. Its weakness was its gift. Shin looked up. "But how can my mistakes give life?" The abbot smiled. "Every mistake softens pride. Every failure teaches patience. When your hands tremble, you learn humility. When your heart aches, you learn compassion. These are the flowers that grow from your cracks. If you try to hide them, you deny the world their fragrance." The boy's tears slowed. He looked at the blossoms more closely. Some were drooping, some were torn by the wind, but all of them were alive. He whispered, "Then I should not hate my cracks." "No," said the abbot, "hate only blinds you. Acceptance allows you to see what is still growing." That evening, Shin returned to his work. His writing was still uneven, but his heart was lighter. For the first time, he noticed how the ink glistened under the lamp, how the faint sound of the brush against paper was like a soft song. Each imperfection in his strokes felt like a heartbeat alive, human, true. Years later, when Shin became a teacher, he would tell his own students about the cracked pot. "When you see your flaws," he would say, "remember that they are not mistakes in the design, they are part of the pattern. Through them, your kindness flows." One spring morning, as he tended the garden, Shin noticed the cracked pot had finally split in two. Time and weather had worn it beyond repair. He lifted its pieces carefully and placed them in the soil beside the flowers. He whispered, "You have carried enough." From that place, new flowers grew brighter than ever before. The monks said it was as if the pot's spirit had dissolved into the earth. They began to call that patch of the garden the place of the cracked pot. Whenever visitors came to the temple, they would walk the garden path and pause before it. The abbot would tell them the same story that had passed through generations of monks. He would end it by saying, "Perfection is silent, it holds everything in. Imperfection sings, it lets life flow through. Do not regret the cracks. Through them, peace blooms." And so, the legend of the cracked pot lived on, whispered through time like a prayer. It reminded each person who heard it that no life is wasted, no flaw without purpose. A perfect vessel may hold water, but it is the cracked one that nourishes the ground. Peace does not come from fixing what is broken, it comes from seeing that nothing was ever truly broken at all. When we learn to accept the cracks within ourselves, the doubts, the scars, the losses, we begin to see beauty blooming from them. The sunlight touches the same places where we once felt pain, and flowers grow along the path of what we once tried to hide. So, tonight, as you rest, remember the cracked pot. Whatever part of you feels flawed or incomplete is simply where love and wisdom are meant to flow. Do not regret the crack. The crack gives life. Peace blooms through acceptance. In a quiet valley surrounded by low green hills, there stood a temple that had weathered many years and many seasons. Time had softened its wooden beams and polished its stone paths. Behind the temple, near the edge of the forest, there grew an ancient tree. The monks called it the Old Guardian. Its trunk was thick, wide enough that 6 men holding hands could barely circle it. Its branches reached high into the sky, spreading wide like an open umbrella. Beneath its leaves, the monks meditated, prayed, and found peace. Travelers rested in its shade during summer, and in autumn, its golden leaves covered the ground like small coins of light. The abbot often said, "This tree is like a silent teacher. It does not speak, yet it shows us how to live with patience, with strength, with grace." Among the monks was a young novice named Haru. He had been at the temple for less than a year, but he loved the old tree deeply. Every morning, before the bell rang for meditation, he would walk to it, bow, and sit beneath its branches. He felt calm there. The rustle of leaves reminded him of gentle laughter, and the breeze through its roots made him feel as if the earth itself were breathing. One evening in late summer, the sky grew dark and heavy. Clouds gathered like great mountains above the valley. The air was still. The birds had gone quiet. The monks hurried to close the shutters and tie down the prayer flags. The abbot looked out across the courtyard and said softly, "The wind is coming." By nightfall, the storm had arrived. Rain poured like a river from the sky, and the wind howled through the valley, bending bamboo and shaking doors. The monks gathered in the meditation hall to chant. Between the thunder and the sound of the rain, Haru could hear branches snapping in the forest. When dawn finally broke, the rain stopped. The valley lay still, silver with mist. The monks opened the doors and stepped out into the quiet morning. The ground was soaked, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and pine. Haru ran toward the grove behind the temple to check on the old tree. His sandals slipped in the mud as he hurried down the path. When he reached it, he froze. Half of the great tree was gone. A powerful gust of wind had split its trunk. One of its main branches, so large it had once shaded half the garden, lay on the ground, cracked and broken. The inner wood shone pale and wet, its rings exposed like the inside of a wound. Haru fell to his knees. He touched the bark, rough and soaked with rain. "No," he whispered. "You were so strong. How could you fall?" He felt grief rise in his chest. To him, the tree was alive, not only a part of nature, but a friend, a teacher. It had listened to his thoughts, his doubts, his prayers. He sat in silence for a long time beside its fallen branch, tears mixing with the rain still clinging to the leaves. When the abbot found him there, he placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "You mourn the old guardian," he said softly. Haru nodded, unable to speak. The abbot looked at the broken trunk for a long while. Then he said, "It has shared enough shade." Haru looked up, confused. "But master, it is ruined. It will never be the same again. How can you speak so calmly?" The abbot smiled faintly. "My son, you see loss, but I see completion. This tree has stood for hundreds of years. It has given shelter to birds, shade to travelers, and peace to our hearts. It has done what it came to do. Why should we call that a tragedy?" Haru frowned. "But it was alive. Shouldn't we be sad that it has ended?" The abbot nodded slowly. "Sadness comes when we wish things to last beyond their time. The tree has simply followed the law of all living things. It grew, it flourished, and now it rests. Even endings serve their purpose." He touched the broken bark. "This wood will warm us in winter. The roots that remain will feed the soil, and perhaps one day another tree will grow from this very place. Tell me, Haru, what has truly been lost?" The young monk stared at the remains of the great tree. The abbot's words made sense, yet his heart still hurt. He bowed his head. "I understand, master, but my heart is slower than my mind." The abbot smiled gently. "Then let your heart catch up. There is no hurry. Grief is a kind of love that has nowhere left to go. Sit with it until it learns to breathe again." And with that, he left the boy to his thoughts. For days, Haru visited the tree each morning. The air around it smelled of damp wood and earth. The birds had returned, hopping along the fallen branches. Bees buzzed around the flowers that still grew at its roots. Slowly, the sight of the broken trunk began to hurt less. One morning, he noticed something he had missed before: tiny green shoots sprouting from the fallen limb. Life was finding a way to return. He smiled for the first time since the storm. Later that day, the monks began clearing the broken branches. They gathered the wood and stacked it carefully to dry. When winter came, that same wood crackled in the temple's hearth, warming the monks during their evening meditations. Haru sat by the fire and thought of the abbot's words. Even endings serve their purpose. The warmth on his skin was the same life that once shaded him in summer. The tree had changed its form, but it had not vanished. When spring arrived, the monks planted a new sapling beside the old stump. The abbot said it was not to replace the old tree, but to honor it. "Nothing truly replaces what has passed," he told them. "We only continue the story." Haru tended to the sapling every day. He watered it carefully, brushed snow from its leaves, and spoke to it softly as he had once spoken to the old tree. Sometimes he felt the wind moving through its tiny branches, and he imagined the spirit of the old guardian watching over them still. Years passed, and Haru grew into a teacher himself. The sapling became a young tree, strong and tall. One summer afternoon, a novice approached him after meditation, his face troubled. "Master Haru," the boy said, "I don't understand why everything must die. Why can't the good things stay?" Haru smiled, seeing himself in the young student. He led the boy to the grove and stopped before the old stump, now covered in moss. Beside it, the young tree stood tall, its leaves shimmering in the light. "Do you see this?" he asked. The novice nodded. "This stump once belonged to a great tree. I cried when it fell. I thought its life was over. But now, look, its roots still feed the soil. Its wood still warms our fires. Its fall made space for this new life. Would you call that loss or transformation?" The boy thought for a while. "Transformation, master." "Exactly," Haru said. "The world does not take without giving. What ends in one form begins in another. When you understand this, endings will no longer frighten you. You will see them as beginnings wearing a different face. The novice nodded but still looked uncertain. It's hard to let go, though. Haru smiled kindly. Yes, it is. That is why we practice. We practice letting go of small things, our impatience, our pride, so that when larger things fall away, we can release them too. The heart learns peace not through holding, but through opening. That night, as the monks gathered in the hall, the abbot asked Haru to speak. He told the story of the storm, the fallen tree, and the lesson his master had given him long ago. "The tree taught me that nothing in life is wasted," he said. "Even when broken, it continued to serve. Even in silence, it continued to teach. We call something an ending when we can no longer see its form, but life never stops, it only changes its direction." The monks listened quietly. Outside, the wind moved through the new tree's leaves, whispering softly against the wooden walls. It sounded almost like the old guardian breathing again. Years later, when Haru himself became abbot, he would often sit beneath that tree, now large enough to shade the entire courtyard. He had grown old, his hair white, his movements slow, but his eyes were bright with the same peace his teacher once carried. One evening, as the sun set and the monks lit the temple lamps, Haru called a young novice to his side. "Do you hear the wind in the leaves?" he asked. "Yes, master," the boy said. "It sounds like the tree is singing." Haru smiled. "It sings the same song the old tree once sang, the song of change. Everything in the world hums that tune, but few listen closely enough to hear it. The mountains, the rivers, even our breath all rise and fall in rhythm with it. To live in harmony with that song is to find peace." The boy frowned. "But master, when the wind stops, doesn't the song end?" Haru shook his head gently. "The wind never truly stops. It only rests before moving again. The song is always there. Sometimes you hear it, sometimes you feel it. When the old tree fell, its song did not end, it simply changed instruments." That night, Haru dreamed of the storm long ago. He saw the great tree bending under the weight of the wind, then breaking, then lying still. But this time, in the dream, he did not feel sorrow. He felt gratitude. The tree had given everything it had to give, and that was enough. When he woke the next morning, the valley was wrapped in mist, the air was cool, the ground soft with dew. Haru walked slowly to the grove, leaning on his staff. He stood before the young tree, now mighty and full of life, and bowed deeply. "Thank you," he whispered to the old tree, to the new one, to everything that had ever passed and everything still to come. He knew his own time was nearing its close, but he felt no fear. The old abbot's words echoed in his mind. It has shared enough shade. When Haru passed away that winter, the monks buried him beneath the tree he had planted. In the spring, flowers grew over his resting place. Travelers who came to the temple would often rest beneath its branches, feeling the cool air and the dappled light. The monks would tell them, "Two trees grow here, one that stands and one that once stood. They are not separate. One gave its life so the other could reach the sky." And when visitors asked what that meant, the monks would smile and say, "Even endings serve their purpose." The story of the old tree reminds us of a truth we all meet but rarely understand. Nothing that ends is truly gone. Life changes, shape the way clouds change, form one moment a branch, the next a flame, the next a seed. We fear endings because we think they steal something from us. But in truth, they simply give what is finished back to the whole. The leaf that falls feeds the soil. The flame that burns warms the night. The life that fades clears space for what is next. When we lose someone or something we love, grief is natural. But if we look deeper, we can see that love never vanishes. It only moves into new forms, a memory, a lesson, a kindness passed on. As you rest tonight, Think of the old tree. What has fallen in your life may have already begun to bloom elsewhere. What seems broken may still be feeding the roots of something new. Endings are not the closing of life's story, they are its turning pages. And peace comes when we no longer resist them, but bow to them softly and say, "It has shared enough shade." There was once a traveler who wandered from temple to temple across the mountains of the East. His name was Ren. He carried no map, no plan, only a heart full of questions and a longing he could not quite name. He had left his village years ago, telling his family that he wished to seek wisdom. "I will not return," he said, "until I find peace." They had blessed his journey, thinking he might be gone for months. But months turned to years. Ren had seen many things on his travels. He had climbed high passes where the wind cut like a blade, crossed fields of gold in autumn, and slept beside rivers that glittered beneath the stars. In every temple he visited, he listened to the words of the masters, hoping to find the answer to his restlessness. The monks were kind. They offered him rice, shelter, and teaching. But wherever he went, he carried a habit that none could change. Each time he left a temple, he picked up a small stone from its garden or path. "This stone will remind me of what I've learned here," he would say. "I must not forget any of these lessons." At first, his collection was small, just a few pebbles wrapped in a cloth. But with every journey, the bundle grew heavier. In one temple by the sea, a monk taught him about patience, and Ren took a smooth white stone from the shore. In another, high among the clouds, he learned about compassion and took a round, grey rock from the mountain trail. He carried one for every teaching, some small, some large, each with a meaning he was afraid to lose. Soon, his pack grew heavy. He began to walk slower, rest more often, and sweat under the weight, but he told himself it was worth it. "Each stone is precious," he said. "Each one is a part of my journey." One afternoon, he arrived at a forest temple near a river. The abbot there was an old man with eyes like still water. Ren bowed deeply and said, "Master, I have come seeking wisdom. I have traveled far, and I carry with me the lessons of every place I have been." The old abbot looked at him curiously. "Lessons?" Ren nodded. He set down his bag with a heavy thud. "Yes, in this bag, I keep a stone from each temple I have visited. Each one represents a truth I must remember." The abbot smiled faintly. "And what truth have you learned from carrying them?" Ren hesitated. "That knowledge is precious. That to forget is to lose progress." The old man nodded slowly, then said, "Come, sit by the river with me." They walked together down the slope to the water's edge. The river was wide and slow, its surface shining in the light of late afternoon. The master sat on a rock and gestured for Ren to join him. "Tell me," the abbot said, "why do you seek wisdom?" Ren thought for a moment. "Because I wish to find peace." The master nodded. "And has peace come to you yet?" Ren looked down. "Not yet, but I have gathered much understanding. I know the words of the masters and the meaning of many sutras. I carry their lessons with me." The abbot smiled gently. "You carry their words, yes, but do you carry their silence?" Ren frowned. "I don't understand." The old man pointed to the traveler's bag. "How heavy is that?" Ren sighed. "Very heavy, but it holds all I have learned." The master looked at the river and said quietly, "Then you are like a man who collects cups of water from every stream, believing he can hold the ocean in his hands. He carries so much that he cannot drink." Ren stared at the rippling water. "But if I let go of these stones, won't I forget what I have learned?" The abbot chuckled softly. "If a truth is real, it will not be lost. What stays in the heart needs no burden to protect it." Ren was silent. The wind moved through the reeds, and the sound of water filled the space between them. After a long moment, the master said, "Take off your bag." Ren hesitated but obeyed. He slipped the straps from his shoulders, and the weight dropped from him like a sigh. "Now," said the master, "walk along the river bank." Ren did as he was told. He walked a few steps and stopped. His body felt light, almost unfamiliar. The air seemed clearer, his breath easier. The master called out, "How does it feel to walk without the weight?" Ren smiled faintly. "It feels free." "Then why not walk farther?" Ren turned back toward his bag. "But my stones?" The master shook his head. "The stones will stay. The lessons will travel." Ren sat down by the river, looking at the bag resting on the ground. He untied the knot and reached inside. His hands moved through the cool, rough stones. Each one brought back a memory: the sea breeze, the mountain fog, the faces of kind monks who had once guided him. He picked up one smooth, dark, and small. "This," he said, "reminds me of patience." The master nodded. "Good. Now, can you feel patience without holding the stone?" Ren thought for a moment, then placed the stone in his palm. He breathed slowly, remembering the calm of the sea, the rhythm of the waves. The feeling returned easily. "Yes," he said softly, "it's still here." The master smiled. "Then you can release the stone." Ren hesitated but dropped it into the river. It vanished beneath the surface with a quiet splash. He took another grey and rough. "This one reminds me of compassion." "Does compassion live in the stone, or in you?" the master asked. Ren looked down at the stone in his hand. "In me," he whispered. "Then you no longer need the stone." Ren let it fall into the river. One by one he lifted each stone, remembered its lesson, and let it go. Some made soft plunks, others rolled into the shallows. With each release, his heart grew lighter. When the bag was empty, he felt an odd stillness inside him, a mix of peace and emptiness. He looked at the abbot. "It feels strange," he said. "Like I have lost something, and yet gained something too." The master nodded. "When the hands open, the heart opens. Only an empty cup can be filled." Ren bowed his head. "Master, I have spent years gathering wisdom, but I see now that I was gathering weight." The abbot smiled. "Knowledge becomes wisdom only when it is lived, not carried. You have been walking with your mind full, and so your eyes could not see the path. Now you can travel again." That evening, Ren stayed at the temple. He shared a simple meal with the monks: rice, vegetables, and tea. There were no grand sermons, no formal teachings. The abbot spoke little, and yet Ren felt he understood more than he had in years of studying words. As night fell, the river shimmered under the moonlight. Ren walked back to the bank and sat by the water. The current whispered softly, carrying his stones downstream. He watched them disappear into the dark, feeling no sorrow, only gratitude. The next morning, when the monks gathered for breakfast, the abbot noticed the traveler preparing to leave. "Where will you go now?" he asked. Ren bowed. "Where the road leads, master. But this time I will go without collecting." The abbot smiled. "Then you will walk farther than ever before." Ren bowed again and began his journey anew. The world seemed different, brighter, lighter. He noticed the scent of pine in the wind, the sound of birds calling across the valley, the rhythm of his own steps. He walked easily, as if the earth itself supported him. For many days, he traveled like this, without hurry, without burden. Sometimes he stopped to rest under trees or share a meal with villagers. When people asked where he came from, he simply said, "From the road." One afternoon, he met a farmer mending a fence by a dusty path. The man looked up and said, "Traveler, you walk far. Don't you grow tired with nothing to carry?" Ren smiled. "I used to carry much more stones, thoughts, memories. I believed they were necessary. But I learned that the lighter the bag, the farther the feet can go." The farmer nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps I too carry too much. My worries are heavy." Ren picked up a small pebble from the ground and handed it to the farmer. "Carry this instead. Whenever your mind feels full, hold this stone and remember that burdens can be small if you let them." The farmer laughed softly and tucked the pebble into his pocket. "Thank you, traveler." As Ren walked away, he smiled. The stone he had given away felt lighter than all those he had once carried. Years later, Ren became known across the land as the monk without baggage. He never stayed long in one place, yet wherever he went, people said he brought calm. He carried nothing but a walking stick and the clothes on his back, but when people sat with him, they felt as though he had given them something invisible. One evening, as he sat with a group of villagers, a woman asked, "Master, how did you find peace?" Ren smiled gently, "By learning how to put things down." She frowned. "But what if what you carry is important, a memory, a love, a duty?" He nodded. "Then carry it with care, but not with weight. Love does not become lighter by being clung to. Duty is not fulfilled by being feared. Even joy can become heavy when you try to keep it forever. Life moves like a river. The tighter you hold, the more it slips away." The villagers listened quietly as the sun sank behind the hills. The traveler looked at the horizon, his eyes calm. "To travel far," he said softly, "carry little." As years went by, Ren grew old. His hair turned white, his steps slowed, but his heart remained light. One spring morning, he came once more to the same river where he had left his stones so long ago. The water still flowed, sparkling in the sunday. He sat on the same rock where he had once sat with the abbot. Closing his eyes, he listened to the sound of the river. It sounded like laughter, like memory, like silence. He whispered to the wind, "Master, your lesson still carries me." He reached down, picked up a small stone from the riverbed, and turned it over in his hand. Then he smiled and tossed it back into the current. When a passing monk saw him there later that day, he found the traveler sitting peacefully, his head bowed, as if asleep. The river flowed beside him, endless and free. The monk buried him by the bank, beneath a tree that leaned gently toward the water. He placed a single stone upon the grave, a stone smooth from the river's touch. Years later, travelers who stopped by the river often noticed the stone shining softly in the light. When they asked the monks about it, they were told, "That is where the wanderer rests, the one who carried nothing and found everything." And if they listened carefully, they could still hear the river whispering through the valley, "To travel far, carry little." This story reveals a quiet truth at the heart of Zen. Peace is not found in what we hold, but in what we release. The more we cling to things, to memories, to ideas of who we must be, the heavier our journey becomes. We think that by gathering more knowledge, more possessions, more certainty, we will be closer to freedom. Yet freedom is what arrives when we stop gathering. When the hands are empty, the heart is light enough to move. To travel through life without burden does not mean to abandon love or purpose. It means to hold them gently, without fear of losing them. Tonight, as you rest, think of the traveler by the river. What stones are you still carrying? Which memories, fears, or ambitions weigh upon your back? You do not need to throw them all away at once. Simply loosen your grip. Let one small weight fall. Feel the freedom of an unburdened step. Because to travel far, to live deeply, you must carry little. In a temple high on a mountain, where the air was thin and the night stretched long and cold, the monks carried lanterns to light their way. Each evening, when darkness fell and the wind began to move through the pine trees, small golden flames flickered across the temple grounds, soft lights against the vast sky. Among the monks there was one named Keiji, a young man devoted and sincere. He had come to the temple seeking peace, yet his mind was often restless. He feared mistakes, feared losing what he loved, feared doing wrong. Even his devotion carried a trace of anxiety, as though he believed the smallest carelessness might undo everything he worked for. One winter evening, as the monks prepared for meditation, a strong wind began to blow across the courtyard. The lanterns swayed, their flames bending and shrinking. KG was carrying his own lantern toward the main hall when the wind nearly extinguished it. He gasped, shielding it quickly with both hands. The flame flickered weakly but held. As he walked, he kept his palms close, cupping them tightly around the glass. "I must protect it," he thought. "If it goes out, I will be careless in my duty." The wind howled louder. KG drew the lantern closer to his chest, wrapping his sleeves around it. He could feel its small heat against his robe. But soon the air inside the lantern grew thin, and the flame began to struggle. It sputtered, dimmed, and finally vanished into smoke. KG froze. He opened the lantern quickly, fanning it with his hands, but the flame was gone. Only darkness and the faint smell of burnt oil remained. He stood there in the courtyard, heart heavy. Around him, the other monks' lanterns still glowed, swaying gently in the wind. He looked down at his, dark and lifeless, and felt shame rise within him. "Why?" he whispered to the night. "I tried so hard to protect you." He carried the extinguished lantern to the meditation hall and placed it near the entrance, his shoulders slumped. The old master noticed his troubled face, but said nothing until the prayers were finished. When the chanting ended and silence filled the hall, the master turned to him. "KG," he said softly, "why does your light not shine tonight?" KG bowed low. "Master, the wind was strong. I tried to protect the flame, but in shielding it, I smothered it. I failed." The master looked at him for a long moment, his expression neither stern nor kind, only full of understanding. "Come with me," he said. They stepped outside. The wind had quieted, leaving the air still and cold. The moon hung low over the valley, and the night smelled of pine and snow. The master led KG to the edge of the courtyard, where a single lantern still burned by the garden wall. Its light shimmered softly against the stone. "Look closely," the master said. "See how it moves?" KG nodded. The flame bent gently in the small breeze, then lifted again, steady and bright. "The wind touches it," the master said, "but it does not die. Why?" KG thought for a moment. "Because it is open," he said finally. "The air moves through it." The master smiled. "Yes, it breathes." He turned to KG. "You tried to protect your light by closing it off from the wind, but in doing so, you took away its breath. You cannot protect light by clutching it, only by letting it breathe." KG lowered his eyes. "I only wanted to keep it safe." The master nodded. "And in your fear of losing it, you lost it. This is how we treat many things we love: our peace, our faith, our happiness. We hold them too tightly, and they vanish. The light needs space to live, just as the heart does." KG listened silently. The flame beside them swayed again in the wind, steady and alive. The master continued, "To protect something truly, you must allow it to move. A flame cannot survive in stillness, and neither can the spirit. Both die when they are closed away from life." That night, KG returned to his quarters. He sat beside the dark lantern, staring at its cold glass. The master's words echoed in his mind. He realized that what had gone out was not only the flame, but his trust, his ability to let things exist without fear. He slept little. In the morning, before dawn, he took his lantern back to the courtyard and relit it. The air was calm, and the first light of morning painted the snow silver. He carried the flame gently this time, not too close, not too far, letting the air flow around it. The flame danced freely, bright and soft. He smiled to himself. Over the next weeks, KG thought often about what the master had said. He began to notice how he carried other parts of his life, his studies, his prayers, even his friendships. He guarded them all so carefully that there was no room left for ease or joy. He realized that his fear of losing peace had become the very thing keeping him from it. One afternoon, while sweeping the meditation hall, he watched a bird fly through the open door, and perch on a beam above the altar. It stayed there for a while, tilting its head, then flew back out into the sky. He thought, if I tried to keep it, it would stop singing. Only freedom lets it live. That evening, during meditation, the master said, "Peace is not something you hold, it is something that holds you. It comes when you stop gripping life so tightly that it cannot move." Keiji understood. Years passed, and the young monk grew into a calm, thoughtful man. One winter night, a new novice joined the temple. The boy was nervous, eager to please, always afraid of doing wrong. He reminded Keiji of himself long ago. During the first night of the cold season, when the wind returned to the mountains, the boy was given a lantern to carry to the gate. Keiji watched from the corridor. The boy walked carefully, shielding his flame with both hands. Moments later, the lantern went out. Keiji approached him gently. "What happened?" The boy looked down, ashamed. "I tried to protect it from the wind, but it died." Keiji smiled kindly. "Come, let us walk." They went to the garden, where a few lanterns still flickered among the trees. The boy watched them, their flames swaying but never dying. "Do you see how they live?" Keiji asked. The boy nodded. "Yes, they move with the wind." "Exactly," said Keiji. "When you closed your hands, the flame had no air. It needed what you were afraid to let in." The boy looked up. "Then how do I protect it?" Keiji's smile deepened. "By trusting it to live. You cannot protect light by clutching it, only by letting it breathe." The boy stood in silence, letting the words sink in. The wind brushed against them softly, and the lanterns danced in the night. From that day on, Keiji began teaching the younger monks about the balance between care and control. He told them, "Fear is like a hand that grips too tightly. It tries to hold peace, but instead it crushes it." He reminded them that love, too, could be smothered by possession, that faith could be suffocated by certainty, and that joy could fade when held too firmly. "Light lives in openness," he would say. "So does everything worth keeping." The lesson of the lantern spread quietly among the monks. They began to notice how often they tried to shield their inner flame, protecting their thoughts, their time, their emotions so fiercely that their spirits grew small. Slowly, they learned to let things breathe again. Their friendships, their laughter, their prayers. Even the temple itself began to feel lighter. Years later, when Keiji had grown old, he sat one evening with a young monk by the temple gate. The boy had been struggling with fear of failure. "Master," he said, "I'm afraid of making mistakes. Every time I try to meditate, my thoughts wander. I try to hold still, but peace slips away." Keiji looked at him kindly. "You are trying to trap peace, just as I once tried to trap a flame. But peace is not a thing to be trapped. It is the space between breaths. When you clutch at it, you lose it. When you let yourself breathe, it finds you." The young monk looked down. "It sounds simple, but it feels difficult." Keiji laughed softly. "All truths sound simple. It is we who make them hard. Let go of your trying, and peace will come like air into an open hand." That night, the wind rose again. The monks went about lighting their lanterns, the flames dancing like golden petals in the dark. Keiji watched them from the steps, his eyes calm, his heart quiet. He thought of that night long ago, the night his flame had gone out, and smiled. What he once saw as failure had become his greatest teaching. As he sat there, a gust of wind passed through the courtyard. The lanterns swayed, and some flickered low. One went out completely. A young monk nearby rushed to relight it, but Keiji stopped him. "Let it be," he said softly. "The flame will return when the air is ready." And indeed, moments later, a small spark leapt from a nearby lantern, carried by the wind. It touched the wick, and the flame came alive again. Keiji nodded to himself. "See," he whispered, "light finds its own way when you give it room." When dawn came, the sky blushed with color and the mountains glowed with gold. The monks gathered for prayer. Keiji lit the last lantern of the morning and placed it before the altar. The flame wavered, then steadied. He watched it for a long time, his breath moving in rhythm with its dance. Then he whispered, "To protect the light, one must trust it to live." That night, Keiji passed away quietly in his sleep. In the morning, the monks found him sitting upright, his face peaceful, his hands resting on his knees. Beside him, the same lantern still burned, its small flames steady and bright. The monks buried him on the hillside overlooking the valley. Each year, when the winds returned, they lit lanterns all around the temple and let them sway freely in the night air. They called it the Festival of Breathing Light. When travelers asked about it, the monks would tell them, "Long ago, a man learned that you cannot protect light by clutching it, only by letting it breathe." And so the temple glowed through the seasons, its flames alive, moving gently with the wind, not in defiance of it, but in harmony. The story of the lantern's flame reminds us that peace, love, and joy cannot survive when held too tightly. We fear losing what is precious, so we grasp at it, trying to guard it from every wind. But in doing so, we take away the very space it needs to live. Happiness, like a flame, breathes through openness. Faith strengthens not by being forced, but by being trusted. Love deepens when allowed to move freely, not when confined by fear. If you have been holding something too tightly, a dream, a person, a moment, loosen your grip. Let it breathe. As you rest tonight, imagine the small flame of your own spirit. Do not cover it with worry or shield it with fear. Simply let it move with the quiet winds of your breath. You cannot protect light by clutching it. You can only keep it alive by letting it breathe. For thousands of years, Zen masters have whispered the same truth in 100 quiet ways. Peace is not something you chase. It appears when you stop clinging. The monk and his teacup taught us that an empty cup can be filled. The fisherman learned that what we stop chasing returns on its own. The cracked pot, the broken brush, the old tree each revealed that what we call imperfection is often life's way of showing us wholeness. The raindrop reminded us that falling isn't the end, it's becoming part of something vast. And through them all runs one gentle thread. When we loosen our grip, when we release control, when we stop clutching at what must move on, peace, like breath, like light, finds its way back to us. So tonight, as you step into silence, let go of the thought, the fear, the need to understand. Let life breathe through you. If these stories touched your heart, I'd love to hear which one stayed with you most. Leave a comment below. Your reflections may become someone else's moment of peace. And if you wish to walk further on this quiet path together, subscribe to the channel. Each week, we'll share more Zen stories, soft lanterns for the mind, reminders that letting go is not losing, but returning home. Let go, breathe, be still, peace will find you.